that will be around throughout the day. So do make sure you're thinking about some skin protection. Feeling a bit cooler along eastern coastal areas with that breeze, but generally 20 degrees and feeling warm as you head further west. Into the overnight period, again, we'll see largely clear skies, so temperatures will be dropping off once again, the risk of that patchy frost. It's going to be the northern areas of Scotland where we'll stay cloudiest as we head into Tuesday, perhaps the odd spot of drizzle for parts of Shetland, but elsewhere it'll be staying dry once again and a good amount of sunshine if you are still heading outside. Just a bit of cloud floating its way in along eastern coastal areas. High pressure is staying with us as we head throughout the rest of the week, but as winds move in a clockwise direction around this, we're still going to be feeding in that easterly, northeasterly breeze with cloud potentially just pushing into eastern areas throughout the week. So generally, west is going to be best for those temperatures. Bye-bye.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 3 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me in the next hour, going to head-to-head in a clash of minds, is author and broadcaster Amy Nicol and former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib. And then, coming up between 4 and 6, I'll be joined by author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. But before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you very much and good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 3. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. ITV sources have told GB News bosses have just 7 days to save this morning following the Philip Schofield affair. Staff members who raised concerns about the TV presenter's actions say executives need to prove they're properly addressing the issue and they'll need to win back the trust of viewers. The broadcaster has confirmed the show will air tomorrow, adding it's not under review and there are no plans for it to be axed. A 5-year-old girl has died following a house fire in Pembrokeshire. Despite the efforts of emergency services, Alicia Salisbury passed away at the scene of the blaze in the Ponty Glacier area last night. Her family, who described her as a beautiful daughter and sister, are being supported by specialist officers. The force says it's working to establish the cause. The government is launching an ad campaign to stop people from crossing the channel. The advert, set to be circulated in Albania next week, will warn people they face being detained and removed if they make the journey. Critics have already branded it as pointless, saying it won't deter them. A record number of people made the crossing in small boats last year, and more than 6,000 have been intercepted so far this year. Meanwhile, Labour says it would impose time limits on hiring overseas workers in a bid to curb migration. The Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has told the Sunday Telegraph it would serve as an incentive to train British workers. She also suggested the party would ask the Migration Advisory Committee for appropriate timescales for importing labour. Supermarkets could be asked to introduce a price cap on basic food to help struggling households. The government is reportedly drawing up plans suggesting the move, but a Treasury source told the Sunday Telegraph it would be voluntary. The scheme would see retailers charging the lowest possible amount for products like bread and milk. Food prices, which are expected to keep rising, have increased by 19.1% in the year to March. 2 Just Appall protesters have been charged after disrupting the Gallagher Premiership rugby final at Twickenham. 37-year-old Dr Patrick Hart from Bristol and 40-year-old Sam Johnson from Essex ran onto the pitch and threw orange powder onto the field. Play was suspended as the men were escorted from the stadium. They've been charged with aggravated trespass. And finally, Mars bars are going green, with the company upgrading its packaging to be more environmentally friendly. The wrapper is being switched from plastic to paper as part of a pilot scheme. The move's being introduced as Mars explores different options which protect the integrity of the chocolate bars. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Nana.
So good afternoon. If you just joined me, welcome on board. It's fast approaching 5 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, before we get stuck into our head-to-head, let me introduce you to my panel. So joining me today is author and broadcaster Amy Nicol. Hello. And also former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib. Right, well, they'll be going head-to-head in a clash of great minds, but let's see what else is coming up today. Right, so the secret lover of Philip Schofield was reportedly just 15 when they met at a theatre school, when the former ITV presenter was giving a talk. Now, an insider has told GB News that ITV have 7 days to save the show, but the broadcasters also said the programme will air as usual tomorrow morning. But have you had your fill of this scandal? Pardon the pun. Then Rishi Sunak will urge supermarkets to cap basic food prices to help tackle the cost of living crisis. Should the government implement French-style price controls? Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting's piece in today's Mail on Sunday reveals the real reason immigration is out of control is the Labour Party, the new low immigration party. Right, the war in Ukraine continues as Russia carried out the largest drone attack on the city of Kyiv overnight. But has the UK reached its geopolitical goals, and should we continue to support Ukraine? And then more than half of voters now want Britain to forge closer ties with the EU. That's according to the new poll by Focal Data or whatever it is. But you know what? I read this piece, it was in The Guardian. It did position itself in a manner that would suggest that everybody who voted to leave did not want close ties to the EU. So I think that's slightly misleading. But what do you think? So, should we mend our relationship with Brussels? That's coming up in the next hour. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbnews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. Right, so, of course, we're going head-to-head in a clash of minds. We're going to be doing that. So let's start with more revelations about Philip Schofield's affair with a younger runner. According to the Mail on Sunday, it has been revealed that the secret lover of the former ITV presenter was just 15 when they met. Now, it reported the meeting took place at a theatre school where Philip Schofield was talking. His former partner, TV partner, Holly Willoughby, has now said that Philip Schofield's admission of their relationship was very hurtful. And an insider has told GB News that ITV has 7 days to save this morning. That's 1 week to you and I, which is actually only 5 days because it's only on air 5 days a week. But what do you think? ITV have confirmed that the programme will return tomorrow morning at the usual time. But is this scandal actually newsworthy? Do you care? So joining me now to go head-to-head is author and broadcaster Amy Nicole and also former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib. Amy, I'm going to come to you. This is a big scandal. Everyone's talking about it. I love that dress, by the way. It's beautiful. Very nice. What do you think?
Well, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't interested. I think this has been irresistible gossip, hasn't it? Everybody seems to have a story, an anecdote about it. And I think it's because daytime TV is supposed to be squeaky clean. It's meant to be, you know, tray bakes and advice about housewives, whatever. And the fact that it could be tainted like this, and as it unfolds, it's very reminiscent of the Weinstein, the Weinstein vibes it's giving me. It's a young, impressionable boy who wanted a career in TV, and that is an abuse of power, isn't it? Because he got him his job in TV and then they proceeded to have a relationship. And I think that's what makes this so stinky. And Philip Schofield, he's deceived us all. We all trusted him. He was a safe pair of hands. Although he was never that popular. He had an average popularity rating of 37% throughout the time he was on the show. But we trusted him, didn't we?
I didn't like him at all.
I think, and it's the way he managed to convince not only the audience, but his wife, now seemingly his TV partner, Holly Willoughby. He convinced everyone, and we feel deceived. And I think that's why. But don't forget, this is gossip, yes, but gossip is good for us, and it bonds people. It's been proven. Gossip has health benefits, so I'm taking it as a positive.
Depends if you are the centre of that gossip.
Oh, no, not for him. Not for Phil.
Not for him, but then you said he's deceived everybody. He didn't... A lot of people around him appeared to have already known. The rumours were going everywhere anyway.
How one star can have so much sway. He had so much say over who worked at This Morning, who got the chop, who stayed, the stars on screen, off screen. He had so much sway. He was like the absolute leader of that show, and I think that's really intriguing.
What do you think, Ben Habib?
Well,
Has it gripped you?
I've been struggling over the last few days to understand why this is newsworthy at all. I mean, it's obviously very sad for Philip it's very sad for Philip to have his reputation trashed.
It's his own fault.
You know, it is his own fault, but I don't think that having an extramarital affair and lying about it is all that unusual in life. Granted, the boy was 15 when he joined, when he met Philip, but I don't think he joined until a few years later. And by the boy's own admission, young man now, the relationship started when he was in his 20s. So,
but they've both. I mean, look, I'm not casting doubt on what he's saying, but they have both lied, haven't they? When ITV initially approached them, they said that there was.
But Nana, how many people?
In fact, Philip has been lying from the start.
But how many people have extramarital affairs and then blast it from the rooftop in order for the integrity of their position to be maintained? It just doesn't happen. This is an age-old story that, unfortunately for the protagonists-antagonists in this particular story, is unfolded in the public domain. But what staggers me, really, I think the real story here is that the British public, if all the airtime it's getting is reflective of their interest in it, can be so interested in something so irrelevant that doesn't really impact anyone's lives.
I don't, you know what, I think there's a level of it that I think is a bit overkill, but there is a level of it that is relevant. And the level
So
of it
what's the relevance?
Relevance to me is that somebody in a senior position can use that position in terms of an abuse of power and literally, you know, put a young person...
But is the young...
No,
he wanted it. He wanted
Sorry, you
a
asked me a
TV
question.
career.
Sorry, hold on, Amy.
But is he...
Hang on, sorry. You asked me a question. I'll finish my answer before you both talk over me. Right. So, no, what I'm saying is it is, in a sense, it's the abuse of power, and that is, I think, the ultimate crux of it. But also because Philip Schofield has lied on so many occasions. I mean, he came out as gay, so he'd been lying to his wife initially, if rumours are to be believed that she didn't know. I thought he was gay anyway. I mean, I'm just saying that's what I thought.
That's what I thought,
I thought he was. So when he said it, I thought, wasn't he already gay? Anyway, so he lied to his wife. And then they did the Q-gate thing where they jumped the queue, which was rather unsavoury considering they're supposed to be squeaky clean, and they did it for the benefit of those who couldn't go. Very nice of Holly. And then this final incident, which is everybody knows about.
Yeah, we completely... I think it's an insight into the way TV and the entertainment industry can work. And I actually wouldn't be surprised if this prompts a bit of a Me Too moment, because I think there's a lot of people...
That's a lot of innuendo there,
A lot of
Amy.
people who work in entertainment who have been in these situations where they've got into relationships to further their on-screen potential.
But the young man
and
is
that's
not...
What this boy... That's what
But
happened
he's
to
not
this boy.
complaining. He's not...
We haven't heard from him, I believe...
Well, we have. His lawyers have made a declaration that actually he maintains no relationship started when he was underage. It all happened later. His lawyers were paid for by Philip Schofield. Really short-sighted thing for Philip Schofield to have done, because he empowered the boy to have third-party advice.
He thought he was controlling it.
You thought he was controlling it, and actually what he did was take the lid off it. But the point is, there has to be... I think it's really wrong to imply that there's some kind of grooming. There may have been grooming, but there's no suggestion from the young man that there's been grooming going on, or that it was an abusive relationship.
Why do you think it is? It's abuse of power, yes.
Because the fact is that the boy had to leave the show, and a lot of sources have said that the boy was very distressed and put out, and we don't know the dynamics. If you're having a relationship...
No, but we don't know. But Amy, you just said we don't know.
We do know that somebody was having a relationship with somebody a lot more junior than them at work, and that's problematic.
And we also know
but that doesn't make it worthy of national news. It doesn't make it necessarily illegal. The innuendo here...
It's incredibly unethical, though, isn't it?
Well, it's wrong in the workplace, and probably it's prohibited by his employment contract. Most employment contracts prohibit relationships within a workplace. But... you know, that in itself, you know, he's being... The impression we're being given by the press is that this boy has been preyed on and that it's an abusive relationship. I think, by the way, most relationships where there's a massive age gap, I think it's unhealthy. I mean, that doesn't mean that, you know, all relationships like that aren't healthy. But the innuendo, I think, is very dangerous, unless there's a specific crime alleged, in which case allege the crime and prosecute it. But there's a suggestion, isn't there?
Neither Nana nor I have used the word grooming.
Well, you said there's a Weinstein element to this.
Well,
that was grooming.
He said, "Hey, boy, I'm going to make you a star. Come on my show, I'll give you a job."
Weinstein is in jail. Weinstein is in jail.
But that's how Weinstein used his power in exactly the same way.
But Amy, to draw the parallel...
But Amy, whilst, you know, I hear the Me Too element of it, other people may come forward if there is such a thing, and if that is the case. But ultimately, the boy was of age, and, you know, ultimately, Philip didn't do anything illegal.
He didn't, but he did something incredibly unethical.
It was unethical,
and
yes.
He seemingly seduced that boy by offering him a job.
But we don't know that for sure. So until that young lad comes forward, then, you know, then those questions will be answered.
You met him at a theatre school.
Well, I know, but you meet people in all sorts of places.
I think if there's an allegation of a crime...
no relationship until he actually joined ITV, and in that case he was of age. But what do you think? Do you think it's newsworthy? Are you interested in the story? I'd love to hear your thoughts. GBViews at gbnews.com. Also, you can get in touch via Twitter at GBNews. Moving on to this story now with number 10. They're drawing plans for retailers to introduce price caps on basic food items. Now, according to The Telegraph, the price of staples like bread and milk would be capped to help tackle the rising cost of living. Now, it's reported that the Prime Minister's aides have started work on a deal with supermarkets like that in France, so France do something similar, where the country's major retailers charge the lowest possible amount for some essential food products. Yet the government insists any action would be voluntary. First of all, what's the point of it being voluntary? But secondly, should the government be doing that? Should they be getting involved in this? Surely we're a capitalist country, so the government shouldn't even be controlling food prices in any way, shape or form. Let's see what my panel make of that. Joining me, author and broadcaster Amy Nicol, and also former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib. Ben.
It is an admission by government that all the levers at the government's disposal to control inflation haven't worked. This is a last-ditch attempt, the public sector going cap in hand to the private sector, which is already taxed to the hilt and regulated to the hilt, and pleading with the private sector to reduce the cost of food. But I've got a wake-up call for Rishi Sunak. He needs to look at the accounts of Sainsbury's and Tesco and these other large supermarket operators. They already operate on wafer-thin margins. There's no room here.
Ben. How do you know that?
Because I deal with retailers all the time. I build shopping centres and retail warehouse parks and invest in them. And I know how retailers operate. The lowest margin operators in amongst retailers are the supermarkets. They work on wafer-thin margins, and the reason that they work at all as a business model is because they use economies of scale, and drive high volumes and therefore make a profit. The notion that inflation is the cause of inflation, or the preponderance of, the increased inflation and it's staying high, is as a result of supermarkets overcharging as daft as brushes. The real problem here is that Rishi Sunak has run out of room on how to grow the economy. He doesn't know how to grow the economy.
It's because he's taxed us so much that
it's because and that's the issue.
Taxed too much.
What he thinks is that by raising taxes and keeping taxes high, he's going to control inflation. In fact, what he's doing is killing the economy, and we're in a downward spiral where it no longer pays to work. We've got 1.1 million job vacancies, 5.9 million people taking some form of universal credit or another, but not matching those two groups of people up because it doesn't pay to work. If you want this country back up on its feet, you've got to cut taxes, get people back into work, take the pressure off wages going up, and make it pay.
Amy.
So just to go back to those figures that you mentioned,
yeah.
So were you not going to include the $3 billion profit that Tesco made?
Amy, they could make 6 billion. It's the margin.
But
You have to look at
that's profit though. That's not.
No, but you've got to look at the percentage margin that they make on turnover. They work on razor thin. That 3 billion could be evaporated if they get their margins wrong. You have to look at the underlying accounts of the company before you come out with a figure. 3 billion will give it all away. These are private entities run for shareholder interests. They have to make a return on their money. They're already on razor-thin margins.
I think if you have Tesco shares at the moment, we're very, very happy with this situation. And there's profiteering going on.
Oh, there's no profit. I mean, ultimately, the problem with socialism, Amy...
Hold on. Let Amy...
Yeah.
As you said, there's profiteering.
There's profiteering going...
This is...
the fact that Tesco made £3 billion last year.
Do you grudge Tesco making a profit?
Yes, I do. When it comes to the
there you
fact
go.
that
Well, you've got to completely... You're hijacked by socialism.
Let me finish. I'd be happy to be hijacked by socialism if it means that mothers can buy baby milk for their children. At the moment in this country, we have, and I know this is often wheeled out, but it is true that we have more food banks than McDonald's. People cannot afford food at the moment. We are up to nearly 20% on food bills. Soon, food bills are going to eclipse
This has got nothing to do with
prices.
Tesco.
No, but this is the government responsibility to look after its citizens by protecting them from food poverty.
It's the government...
And you know what? Also, another thing is the prices are about to increase once again when we have to have these not-for-EU food stickers that I believe you were very much part of bringing in, thanks to good old Brexit.
But Amy, Amy, the thing is, we can't keep... if you want to carry on with the food banks and supermarkets giving away food and so on and so forth, it's going to push the prices up even further.
I think
how are you
what I would do is the government should subsidise certain things. I actually think the things...
So you'd have more government spending?
Yes, more government spending.
So government debt is already at an all-time high. Taxes are already at a 70-year post-World War II high. And you would have more government spending, putting more pressure on the private sector, requiring taxes to stay up, making it impossible for the economy to grow, so people can't have wage growth, so people can't save money, so people can't afford food. Do you not understand that the problem with socialism is that ultimately you run out of other people's money, and that is what is happening with the UK?
I am quite sick of my taxes going to people with plenty of money, such as...
It doesn't.
Are you joking? The gap between the poorest and the richest is huge at the moment. The money is in the top hands that have all the money, the profiteering. Look at the energy companies, the amount of profit they're making. Look at the food
The
companies.
energy companies
Look at
are
all
paying
of the
masses
companies
of
who are
taxes.
making huge profiting. I am sick of living in a country of profiteering. That is my problem at the moment. And if you think that makes me
Well, you've got a problem
lovely
with
for
capitalism.
socialism-
You've got a problem with capitalism.
I think that capitalism
Yeah.
has done huge damages. It of course has benefited the few, such as yourself. I know that you make a lot of money privately, even though you're working as an MP. And
I'm not
good
working.
for you.
I'm not an MP.
Reform Party.
Well,
When you were working as MP,
I do that pro bono.
You made £1 million extras when you were working as MP. So I'm sure these things, like 19% on your food bill doesn't affect you, but it does affect other people.
I am passionate about making the working classes better off.
Well,
But
you're not
you
doing a very good job at it.
You don't make them better off by taxing them more. Why do you think 5.9 million
the wrong
people?
We have 170 billionaires in the UK. Why does anyone need to be a
That's
billionaire?
the politics of envy.
Sorry, Amy.
Oh, yeah, OK.
Amy,
Absolutely.
So should the government be
The
subsidising...
politics of realism, looking where the money is.
Sorry. Amy, I love it. No, I love it.
Ben, we're meant to be talking about food prices. Let's go back.
No. OK, so food prices then.
Well, this is all related.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Should the government then be getting involved in food prices? Yes or no?
Yes.
And better be...
Absolutely not.
OK, great. Thank you. Right, that's their thoughts. What are yours? GBNews at gbnews.com. Get in touch now. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. After the break, I'll be asking my guests what they make of Labour's stance on immigration. That's on the way next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
News Radio.
Good afternoon. If you just tuned in, where have you been? We're ready for another scrap. It's coming up to... I love them. They're great. 26 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, let's have a look at what you've been saying. We've been discussing quite a few bits. Philip Schofield on that scandal. Betty says, I'm fed up with this story. It is no one else's business except that of his family. Jeff says, I don't care. Audrey says, media is rife with affairs which are kept secret. The oldest scandal of humans, so why the overdose of drama? Schofield's admission of an affair, can't speak, is the too many A's, an affair suggests a nip it in the bud, preemptive on his part to dilute a possible kiss and tell, all by his ex-lover. Yeah, it's all a bit, it is, but you know what? It's interesting, isn't it? You've got to admit. And considering the fact that he was so squeaky clean all the time, it's always good to see people who have behaved like that just maybe come tumbling down a little bit. But right, we move on. I'm not bitter. It's not sour grapes. It's not because they didn't give me a job. 26 minutes after 3 o'clock, we're going to move on to Labour, the Labour Party. Are they now the low immigration party? Now, Labour's stance seems to have tightened following this week's record net migration figures. The Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting's piece in today's Mail on Sunday suggests a crackdown of foreign workers. He wrote, the real reason immigration is out of control, the country's obsession with cheap labour from overseas. Hang on a minute, that sounds like something from the Tory party's playbook. Now, this follows Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper telling The Telegraph about the party's plans to put time limits on how long companies can import foreign workers, although that plan sounds a little bit more complex. I don't know how they're going to work that out. But let's welcome again to my panel, author and broadcaster Amy Nicol, also former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib. Amy, I'm going to start with you. Labour, do you think they're the new party of lower immigration? They're saying they're making all the right sound bites.
I think Labour have fallen foul of thinking that this will win them public support and votes, and they're so keen to get this election over the line that they'll say what they think people want to hear, when really I think they know we need to reframe this whole conversation. We're talking about legal migration. We're talking about Labour coming in and actually benefiting our economy. The figures prove that those from non-EU countries coming in working, those from EU countries boost the economy by billions. British workers cost billions, but obviously there's a lot more. People come here for opportunity.
Wouldn't it be more cost-effective, though? Like you said, British workers cost a lot. Wouldn't it be more cost-effective to use British workers?
No, we'd have to retrain them. We'd have to sort them out the jobs. That whole admin around it would cost loads, and that's a lot of these changes and tweaks that Brexit requires.
In the short term,
it doesn't make financial sense.
Well, in the short term,
for example, the agriculture industry depends on migrant labour.
What about Amy? What about the short term then? In the short term, yes, it might cost more to retrain British workers, but in the long term, wouldn't that be better? I'll go to Ben.
Yeah.
Well, look, we've got a fundamentally broken labour market in the United Kingdom. Those on universal credit before lockdowns was 3 million. In 2018, there was less than 1 million people on universal credit. There are now 5.9 million people, and this figure is stuck there. And 2 million of that 5.9 are completely out of the workforce, not looking for work. It doesn't pay to work in the United Kingdom. That is a fundamentally important point that the government and every commentator needs to pick up on. It doesn't pay to work. That's why these people are not working.
And 40% of people on universal credit are in work, proving that.
40% of 6 million. Whereas it was 40% of 3 million before lockdowns and 40% of 1 million in 2018. That 40%, granted, has stayed steady, but the absolute number's gone through the roof. It's because the labour market is broken. The labour market's broken because it doesn't pay to work. It doesn't pay to work because taxes are too high on the working and middle classes. Forget about the rich. The working and middle classes are being overtaxed. And at the same time, benefits have gone up dramatically. So benefits becomes a real career option versus working. And unless you can get that system right, unless that ecosystem is put right, this country is going to go round in ever-decreasing circles down a plug hole. It is the biggest problem facing the country. At the moment, it's absolutely crucial.
I just saw water going down a plug hole.
I know, well, that's exactly what we're doing. And the government's response is we're going to tax more, we're going to give you more benefits, we're going to spend more money on you to try and mollycoddle you, and in the meantime, because you're not working and we've got job vacancies, we'll import people from
But
abroad.
The Labour Party is
and
saying,
that,
but the Labour Party
and that
is saying,
entrenches the problem.
But the Labour Party is saying what you're saying. They're saying that they're going to be the low-tax...
the Labour Party...
And they're also talking about West Streeting is saying less people from abroad. That is going along with what you're saying.
The Labour Party championed and implemented the open border policy that has now gone absolutely rampant under this Conservative Party, which is not Conservative at all. It's another socialist party.
I'd like to pick you up on your belief that benefits is a career option.
Well, it's become a career option because the amount you can make on benefits compares to what you can make on the net median wage.
I would agree with that, but I would also say that a lot of industries are closing down. In certain areas, there aren't any job opportunities. So surely it's more about increasing job potential opportunities in levelling up rather than demonising those who are on benefits.
I'm not demonising them. What I'm saying...
You're saying they're choosing it.
I'm saying that it doesn't pay, literally doesn't pay to work. You're better off, any rational organism, any rational human being, given a choice between making X amount of money by not having to work and X amount of money by working, is going to go for the former option.
I disagree with that. I don't think you have much faith in people. I think
no, that's a completely rational economic choice.
They want to have a profession, they want to have a vocation, and that means more to them for their mental health, for their self-esteem, rather than just thinking about it in purely financial terms. I think you saying, oh, well, you know, they've done the maths and they can sit and watch This Morning, probably wouldn't anymore, though, would they? Watch This Morning, rather than going to work and then topping it up with universal credit. I don't believe that. I think people would much prefer
explain
a job
to me, Amy,
and top it up with universal
explain
credit.
to me
but I would
why
agree with you
universal
that
credit...
wages are too low. I would agree with you. And when
wages are too low or taxes are too high?
No, well, wages are too low. I think taxes are where they need to be. But
how do you put more money into people's pockets?
Because I would tax wealth. Stop taxing workers.
You would tax those people who make money.
Stop taxing workers. Tax wealth, stagnated wealth, inherited wealth.
Listen, how much more do you want to tax?
Unearned income.
How much more do you want to tax?
Why are you laughing at that?
Because
why do you not want to...
What is the point of making more and more money if every time you make more, you're going to be taxed more and more?
Because we're not talking about money being made.
But you said, so if I buy a house...
I'm talking about...
If I buy a house, and then they say, no, well, now, instead of taxing you on this, we're going to increase that to about 50%, and when you sell the house, we're going to take even more and more off you, and in the end, the people who have to do this won't be bothered to do it, and they'll end up all on benefits.
I think you'll find that wealth is handed down generation. Social mobility is absolutely kaput.
There's nothing wrong with handing down wealth.
We need to give people opportunity.
There's nothing wrong with handing down wealth.
It's unearned.
I'm Nana Akua. No, it's not. Your parents earned it. You can have it. They've got it for you. They earned it for you.
They paid tax on it.
That's why I'm working to get things for my kids. That's it. I don't want to give them nothing. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. AB, you've got children. Don't you want to give them stuff?
I want him to be able to earn his own money.
Yeah, but you've got to give
I want him to understand that
they'll never buy a house.
He won't be taxed
after
for
the
his
break.
income.
Keep it for herself and spend it on cats.
Yeah.
After the break, it's time for a great British debate. Should we continue supporting Ukraine, and should the UK form closer ties to the EU? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel author and broadcaster Amy Nickel, also former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thank you very much, Nana. I'm Rory Smith in the GB Newsroom. ITV sources have told GB News that bosses have just 7 days to save this morning following the fallout surrounding Philip Schofield. Staff members who raised concerns say executives need to prove they're properly addressing the issue and they'll need to win back the trust of viewers. The broadcaster has confirmed the show will air tomorrow, adding it's not under review and there are no plans for it to be axed. It comes as new details emerged about Schofield's relationship with a runner who was reportedly 15 years old when they first met. A 5-year-old girl has died following a house fire in Pembrokeshire. Despite the efforts of emergency services, Alicia Salisbury passed away at the scene of the blaze in the Ponty Glacier area last night. Her family, who described her as a beautiful daughter and sister, are being supported by specialist officers. The force says it is working to establish the cause. The government is launching an ad campaign to stop people from crossing the channel. The advert, set to be circulated in Albania next week, will warn people they face being detained and removed if they make the journey. Critics have already branded it as pointless, saying it won't deter them. A record number of people made the crossing in small boats last year, and more than 6,000 have been intercepted so far this year. Meanwhile, Labour says it would impose time limits on hiring overseas workers in a bid to curb migration. The Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has told the Sunday Telegraph it would serve as an incentive to train British workers. She also suggested the party would ask the Migration Advisory Committee for appropriate timescales for importing labour. That's all for now, but you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website. That is gbnews.com.
Thank you, Rory. It's coming up to 36 minutes after 3 o'clock. Still to come. At 4 o'clock, I'll be giving you my take on the immigration crisis and the government's plans to create adverts in Albanian to deter migrants from coming to the UK. But before that, we'll continue with our debates, as I'm asking you, should we keep supporting Ukraine? And should the UK form closer ties with the EU? That is on the way.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
So welcome back. If you went anywhere, don't go anywhere now. We're back. Now you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, you've already been getting in touch with your views on whether we should forge stronger ties with the EU, which we'll be discussing in just a moment. But Karen says, I'm not missing the EU dictatorship. They are unelected and controlling. Good riddance to bad rubbish. Yes, Jay says, of course we should cut all ties with the EU and Brussels. It's like leaving your wife, then ringing her up and asking if you can have a night out. What's the point? I like it. Keep your thoughts coming. It's great. Now, over a year since the Russian invasion, the war in Ukraine continues. Now, today, the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv was hit by a new massive wave of Russian drone attacks. According to Ukraine's Air Force, Russia launched a record 54 kamikaze drones on Ukrainian targets. Now, this follows Britain's new wave of sanctions against Russia during this month's G7 summit. And Defence Secretary Ben Wallace visited to Kyiv this week, where Ukraine thanked the UK for continued military aid. But have we already reached our geopolitical goals, and should we continue supporting Ukraine throughout this war? So let's see what my head-to-headers think of that. Amy Nickel and also Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib. Ben.
When the war kicked off, the big fear we all had was that Russia would go through Ukraine like a dose of salt, and within days or weeks, it would have missiles parked up against the border of Poland, the eastern flank of the Europe, Western Europe, and we would all be threatened by an aggressive, expansionist Russia. And we rightly went to the defence of Ukraine. The geopolitical aim of protecting Western Europe has undoubtedly been achieved. Russia has been pinned down now in the southeast of Ukraine. It's become what I think will end up as a very long-term war. Russia will keep throwing men at this problem. No amount of military aid from the United Kingdom and the US is going to defeat Russia. It'll just keep going. And so I think from a purely domestic perspective, it's time to reassess what our aims now remain in Ukraine, and to think of this from a British perspective, and to decide, therefore, what we do next. And my view is that we need to take a slightly less proactive role in the war with Russia than we've taken so far.
Amy.
I really disagree with you, believe it or not. I think that's really sad that you said that, because this is an attack on a democracy. It's an attack on the West, and therefore it is an attack on us. We need to put everything into making sure that Ukraine can regain its independence. I read today that a medical facility was bombed and a 7-year-old and a 6-year-old died. 2 children lost their lives just this weekend. I mean, amongst the hundreds of other people that are being killed, injured, maimed all the time. We have the military capabilities. We have a big amount of artillery that we can put to use for Ukraine. When you look at it in relation to other G7 countries, we need to all come together because we're the richest, we have the strongest military, the strongest artillery. So we need to fight this enemy.
But what would you say to Ben's point that we're just perpetuating the war?
I totally disagree, because what we've seen since, say, 2014, when we put sanctions, we tried to give Russia a slap on the wrist, all that other stuff, we didn't use force. It opened the door. So you're giving Putin exactly what he wants.
Amy,
he wants us to get this war fatigue. War fatigue is what it's depending on.
It's not war fatigue. I wasn't talking about war fatigue. What I was talking about was the initial need to ensure that we weren't directly threatened by Russia with its missiles on the Polish border. Having achieved that, we need to sit back and reassess what we're trying to get out of this. Are you advocating, in your pursuit of defeating Russia, that we should put British boots on the ground or American troops on the ground and engage directly with Russia?
Hopefully it would not come to that.
Why?
That's why we need...
But why are you not prepared to take that step?
Because we have so much military force.
No, but why are you not prepared to take that step?
We have the pilots.
Why are you not prepared? You said that this was an attack. You said this was an attack on...
Hopefully it would never have to come to that.
But why?
But if it continued, it may have to
why
come
would
to
you?
that.
Why do you hope that it doesn't come to that?
I personally wouldn't be able to rule it out, because I find what's going on so utterly disgusting.
Well, if it's utterly disgusting...
But that's why we need to do everything we can in the West to support against
Amy, what we're doing is throwing money at a war which is becoming intractable. And we're creating an intractable situation out of which neither Russia nor Ukraine is going to easily emerge. So the question I have is, if the ultimate aim is to push Russia out of Ukraine, why are we not taking positive action of committing our troops and our military might to defeating Russia?
I think by throwing everything that we've got without actually engaging in
So you're not prepared to lose British lives on this war?
You need to talk to
You're not prepared to lose British lives on this war?
Not presently, but I think we need to do everything
So you're
to
prepared
defend democracy.
So
it's
you're
too important.
No, if you're prepared, if you're prepared to do everything there is to defend democracy, that would involve putting boots on the ground. What you're saying, if I may just encapsulate it, is you're prepared to throw money at this problem. You're prepared to give them armaments. You're prepared to allow the Ukrainians to fight the Russians, but you're not prepared to get directly involved to get your geopolitical aim, which is the defeat of Russia.
And Amy, are you prepared to go to war? So if they said you have to go, you said throw everything at it.
No,
and
I'm not.
If it was no, so you're not prepared to do it yourself.
Absolutely has not come to that whatsoever.
No, but
do you know what I've been watching?
See what's happening
there
in Ukraine.
There are films of women
see
like
what's happening
me.
In Ukraine.
There's an
see what's happening in Ukraine.
Can I answer you there?
Yeah, please.
There's a TV presenter who worked for the equivalent of MTV in Ukraine who is fighting on the front line. His life was completely normal, much like ours is presently. His life has changed completely overnight. And if you go down Ben's line of thinking, you're just going to leave that to go on because it might affect us in the UK. Exactly, it could be me. So if it came down to it and it was me, we'd all be there.
But you'd be prepared to do it?
We'd have to be. Do you think the people in...
Do you think...
That's such an interesting way to approach a sort of gotcha situation.
It's not a gotcha situation.
There are people in Ukraine who had lives exactly like us.
Amy, we've seen this play out. We've seen wars like Ukraine play out time and time again. We've seen it repeatedly. We saw it in Iraq. We saw it in Afghanistan. We saw it in Syria. We've seen it in Libya. We absolutely nearly toppled Egypt with the same kind of approach. What we do in the West, which we do very well, is chuck money at wars and fight proxy wars.
Ben, I've got to ask you before we finish this up. So Amy's point is quite good, though, because in a sense she said that, so you'd be prepared, just say that war escalates, you would allow it to escalate.
No.
Because you said
the war, the geopolitical, it's become an intractable position. So the line that the British government has is it's up to the Ukrainians to decide when this war should end and on what terms it should end. Well, actually, I disagree. We're financing the war. We're providing the artillery. We should have a seat at the table on how this war ends, because it is British money and British armaments that are going into it. We are causing the death of people. Let's be clear about this.
I would say Putin's causing the death of people.
Yeah, but let's have a quick look at what we're in that war.
On Philip Schofield, because we're talking about Schofield again. Linda says, honestly, not a fan of Philip Schofield or Holly. I'm sick to death with this. See? Right, let's see. John says Philip Schofield had an affair, nothing illegal. That's his private life, not our business. Marion says, I'm far more interested in the Stop Oil activists than Philip Schofield.
Well, that's a good thing, then.
Well, I'm glad you could have told us about why you're interested and what you're interested about. That would have been more useful, actually, to be fair. But let's move on. Another debate. It's been 7 years since the Brexit referendum. And rather than leaving the EU behind, a new poll suggests that more than half of voters now want Britain to forge closer ties to the EU. Now, bear in mind, that story has come from The Guardian. I'm just saying that. I'm just saying. I know, but the actual poll comes from Focal Data, but the story was positioned in The Guardian. And the info is according to a poll by Focal Data. 63% of adults believe Brexit has created more problems than it has solved, even in Brexit-backing constituencies, and more than twice as many voters now think that we should forge closer ties with Brussels. So what do you think? Should the government improve our relationship with the EU? I think I should have come to you because you are a former Brexit Party MEP.
Now, there may be something Amy and I agree on here.
Maybe not.
That the Brexit deal that Boris Johnson signed is a terrible deal for the
we
United Kingdom. Where we will disagree is the nature of the relationship we should have had with the EU post-Brexit. And the position that I have is that the government should have delivered what it promised it would do on the ticket, which was that the United Kingdom would leave the EU. When we voted to leave the EU, we didn't vote for Northern Ireland to be subject to their laws adjudicated by their court. We didn't vote for Great Britain, as distinct from Northern Ireland, tying itself at the hip with the EU on state aid laws, employment, environmental and competition laws. We didn't agree to allow them to go on raping our territorial waters of its fish. We didn't agree that we would join Horizon Europe, which, in amongst all the things that it does, is military research for the European Union. These are all the things that we've got as a result of the deal that Boris Johnson did with the EU. And the only real way to get out of the EU, the only real way to liberate the United Kingdom, to make policies for British national interest...
Yes, what is it? What is the real way?
...is to leave without a deal. And that's what we should have done.
Amy?
But the Vote Leave campaign never suggested we would leave the single
market. The government,
market.
the Prime Minister said, if you vote to leave the EU, we will leave the single market, we will leave the customs union. That's what David Cameron repeatedly said during the campaign.
To propose the referendum.
And he was the Prime Minister.
To propose the referendum.
And he was the Prime
But then the Vote Leave
Minister.
campaign said we won't necessarily leave the single market. Boris Johnson said that, and then he did.
I don't care what Boris Johnson said.
Well, it was quite important because that's what people voted
What we voted for was for the United Kingdom to leave the EU, and the UK has not left the EU.
But there are ways of doing that and remaining in a single market, and that's what I think is...
What way would that be?
But anyway, can I just focus? Because you talk about, like, fish and this and da-da-da. In real life, you promised
That is real life.
You promised me cheaper clothes, cheaper
I didn't
food,
promise you anything.
Lower immigration figures. My dad voted to leave, and I remember the reasons why he did.
Yeah.
And you, not you personally, Vote Leave campaign did not keep a single promise, and they have let down those people clearly.
Which
and
promise?
That is why
Which promise did they break?
Cheaper food, cheaper clothes.
When did they?
Lower immigration figures. £350 million to the NHS. The
NHS, by the way, has had that and some.
Nobody believed that.
The NHS is in a worse state than it was when...
That doesn't mean it hasn't had the £350 million.
Let's be fair, hang on, the NHS, let's not forget COVID. COVID did come in and put a bit of a spanner in the works. So when we talk about the NHS, let's be fair.
It's always going to be intriguing to me that we'd want to leave a really good club.
It's not a really good club. It's an anti-democratic organisation.
We wrote the laws that went through the... So we were almost in charge of that club.
No, we were not in charge of that club. That club is run by a bunch of commissioners who are unelected, unaccountable. The only mechanism by which laws are introduced in the EU is by EU commissioners. The Parliament doesn't suggest laws. Their Parliament doesn't do it. The Council of the European Union doesn't suggest laws. They can ostensibly stop laws, but the only originator of laws is the Commission. It is an anti-democratic organisation.
Those laws were serving us absolutely fine.
No, they weren't.
Every time we make a change to any of those laws, we have to pay public money to tweak and move and shift around. And Brexit is costing us all. It is costing every viewer at least £1,000 plus.
Where do you get that stat from?
Where did you get that from, Amy?
I can't remember off the top of my head where I got that from. That's just look up the average cost of Brexit to an average income person per year.
Let me just define what Brexit is. Let me just define what Brexit is. Brexit,
it's a disaster.
No, Brexit is simply the desire to govern our own country. If you think that governing your own country is, by definition, a disaster, you're really in the wrong country, Amy, forgive me.
What has governing our own country brought me so far? Windermere's full of sewage since Brexit.
But that's not a Brexit issue. That's a failure of governance.
The worst economic growth, bar Russia, which is currently engaged in a war. We've economically sanctioned ourselves through Brexit.
Amy,
so
the
if
reason
that means I'm anti-democratic...
The reason we've got awful growth is because of the socialist policies you and I have just been discussing.
From the Conservative
with an intervention...
who have been in charge for 13 years.
Absolutely, and I'm very critical of this Conservative Party. They are not Conservative. They're basically socialists. The civil service has grown from 480,000 to 530,000 under this government. National debt has gone up to 100% of GDP under this government. Taxes we've discussed already are 70-year high. This government's been a disaster for the economic management of the United Kingdom.
Hang on, so then the question leads to the question, should we form closer relationships with the EU?
We should be breaking free of the EU.
Break free and leave our own politicians to do the job.
That's certainly worked out extremely well, hasn't it?
We haven't broken free.
Currently, I think
Amy, we haven't broken free.
8% of people are happy and consider Brexit in any way successful. You've let
Where
down
did you
a
get
lot
that
of people.
statistic from?
That's a YouGov
I can give you a statistic, actually, from Bloomberg. Apparently,
Yeah.
Brexit is costing the UK £100 billion a year. That's
And it's going to shrink our economy by 4% in the long term.
Bloomberg campaigned vociferously for Remain. That focal data analysis was commissioned by Best for Britain, another vitriolically Remain organisation. propagated by The Guardian, which you correctly identified. And Best of Britain, by the way, while we're on the subject, is chaired by a guy called Lord Darrach, who's now being investigated, allegedly, for selling secrets for sex. That's the sort of organisation... I don't want to digress.
He's not on trial here.
He's not on trial here.
No, he's not here to defend himself, and we don't have any evidence of that, so we'll retract that just quickly, because that's a bit unfair.
Well, it's allegedly. It is alleged in the High Court.
Allegedly doesn't cover everything. You can't just say something and then just say allegedly at the end of it. That doesn't work like that. So really, I mean, look, our own politicians should be in charge of this, and they're doing a very bad job, so I'd agree with all of you. But what is the problem with controlling our own destiny, and why?
Because it's so silly.
And nobody said that we don't want close links to the EU.
Which was so beneficial. The numbers are there.
Not to everybody.
It was economically better off to be in the EU than out the EU.
Says who?
Says the literal cost of the amount, the membership of the EU versus the benefits that we got from it. We're now doing trade with, say, Australia instead of France. We need to be in a trading bloc with our neighbours, not with the other side of the world.
Well, let's see what you've been saying, because lots of you have been getting in touch. Let's have a look. Jill says the benefit system is more, we were talking about benefits earlier, it's more than the minimum wage. We know why people are coming here. It's not rocket science. Seems pretty obvious to me as well. Ian says, whatever happened to supply and demand? Cheap immigrant workers should be stopped. The wages for those menial jobs jobs no one will do is too low. Then we've got Stephen. He says the UK should have closer ties with the EU, but should focus on closer ties with Canada, New Zealand and Australia. And Ian says we voted Leave to gain independence from the EU, not to stay under their undemocratic control. Well, I'm sort of with you on that. Look, we thought our politicians would do a decent job. They failed miserably. We're still waiting for them to do something decent. We're going to carry on with the theme of immigration in my monologue, where I'll be talking about the wonderful little videos they've put together, yes, to convince people smugglers and people who want to come across to this country illegally that they shouldn't do so because the video tells you not to do. I mean, how foolish do they think we or the smugglers are? I'll be talking about that throughout in the next hour for my monologue. Stay tuned. Do not go anywhere. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. There's still so much more to come in the next hour.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. It's 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. For the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thank you very much, Nana. The latest from the GB newsroom. ITV has denied that This Morning is under review following reports the show could be axed. Sources have told GB News that bosses have just 7 days to save the programme following the Philip Schofield affair. Staff members who raised concerns about the TV presenter's actions say executives need to prove they're properly addressing the issue. The broadcaster has confirmed the show will air tomorrow, but viewer opinions vary over the fallout.
It's not really for us to judge someone. I mean, what he did, if it's true that this young chap was 18, there's nothing to do with us. I think he should speak to his family.
I will say that I think perhaps the show needs fresh people on. I think that the show really relied on the chemistry that Holly and Phil had.
For me, I'm less keen to watching the programs with them. As they split, I'm all right, and I think that Holly's gonna get the career even bigger now, you know.
I like Phil and Holly. So I'm very sad to see them go, because I love them both. So it's a pity, really. And I was shocked to hear about Phil, because I didn't think he'd do anything like that, be so deceitful.
Well, it comes as new details emerge about Philip Schofield's relationship with the young ITV employee who was reportedly 15 years old when they first met. The Mail on Sunday says the TV presenter arranged an interview for him, which resulted in a job as a runner when he turned 18. The affair started later. Well, editor of the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, says they were right to question the relationship.
It's so unprecedented. And he wrote to Katie Hind and said, "I don't expect any mercy," which is extraordinary. And it's because actually Katie had been very brave and done a story a couple of weeks ago that sort of went quite far to hint at this friendship. And he sent a complaint to Ipso and said, the Mail has, got this wrong. And of course we hadn't. And so he was right to apologise. But it's not very often in showbiz that people do a full mea culpa like that and say, "Don't show me any mercy."
Well, in other news this afternoon, a 5-year-old girl has died following a house fire in Pembrokeshire. Despite the efforts of emergency services, Alicia Salisbury passed away at the scene of the blaze in the Ponteglacia area last night. Her family, who described her as a beautiful daughter and sister, are being supported by specialist officers. The force says it is working to establish the cause. The government is launching an ad campaign to stop people from crossing the channel. The advert, set to be circulated in Albania next week, will warn people they face being detained and removed if they make the journey. Critics have already branded it as pointless, saying it won't deter them. A record number of people made the crossing in small boats last year, and more than 6,000 have been intercepted so far this year. Meanwhile, Labour says it would impose time limits on hiring overseas workers in a bid to curb migration. The Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has told the Sunday Telegraph it would serve as an incentive to train British workers. She also suggested the party would ask the Migration Advisory Committee for appropriate timescales for importing labour. Well, former Defence Secretary Lord John Hutton says it's a balancing act and the economy also needs to be considered.
There's no easy solution to this problem, though. It's a global phenomenon. People are moving around. And I think we've got to certainly deal with the boats, the illegal entry. But I think we've got to take a very long, hard look at the other aspects of immigration policy. David Davis referred to families of students coming in and so on. I mean, I think there are things that can be done, but it's got to be done in a way that doesn't damage the economy and supports the growth agenda. I think these are important issues for us now, because I think securing economic growth is probably the biggest economic challenge that we face.
Supermarkets could be asked to introduce a price cap on basic food to help struggling households. The government is reportedly drawing up plans suggesting the move, but a Treasury source told the Sunday Telegraph it would be voluntary. The scheme would see retailers charging the lowest possible amount for products like bread and milk, while food prices, which are expected to keep rising, have increased by 19.1% in the year to March. 2 Just Stop Oil protesters have been charged after disrupting the Gallagher Premiership rugby final at Twickenham. 37-year-old Dr. Patrick Hart from Bristol and 40-year-old Sam Johnson from Essex ran onto the pitch and threw orange powder onto the field. Play was suspended as the men were escorted from the stadium. They've been charged with aggravated trespass. Mars bars are going green, with the company upgrading its packaging to be more environmentally friendly. The wrapper is being switched from plastic to paper as part of a pilot scheme to explore different options. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. Back to Nana.
Hello, good afternoon. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. It's just coming up to 7 minutes after 4 o'clock. Instead of focusing on spending taxpayers' money directly on stopping the illegal immigration from places where there is no war or persecution and no real justifiable reason why someone would flee apart from for economic reasons, the government have chosen to spend our money on what can only be described as an advertising campaign to deter people from places like Albania not to come to the UK via illegal means. I mean, why would they think that someone who is prepared to pay a smuggler thousands of pounds would be put off by this? On what planet have they come from where this would actually work? It's just window dressing to make it look like they're actually doing something. Honestly, they think that we're completely stupid. And if this wasn't their way of thinking, how stupid are they for actually believing that this would have any impact whatsoever? Well, this is part of Rishi Sunak's plan to stop the boats. Who would have thought it when he said that this is what he meant? Sounds like a plan put together by naive, woke civil servants who live nowhere near the action. Robert Jenrick, who is now the immigration minister, keep up. He was housing, then he was social care, and now he's immigration, and all that in the space of 3 years, which is a clue as to why nothing ever gets done with this government. He said it would help dispel myths peddled by evil people smugglers. Oh, come on, Robert. The campaign is starting with Albania, warning of the strict new UK laws. Don't make me laugh. I mean, this is far from the truth. They know, and we know, that you have a near 100% chance of staying, and once you get here, you'll be looked after better than you would be in your own country, and that it's pretty easy to run away and disappear into the black economy. I mean, the adverts smack of desperation. And when you've got the likes of Gary Lineker openly criticising the government's language, his comments attracting global attention, and then he's picking up awards for airing his views, despite being paid for by us. I mean, you can see why a stupid propaganda-style video to deter illegals from entering the UK will be laughed at. I mean, he's such a hypocrite anyway, is Gary. This week he collected a Sport and Human Rights Award at a ceremony in Rome for his advocacy for the rights of refugees and migrants. He travelled all the way to Italy to pick it up, his international award for his commitment to promoting human rights through his work as a commentator. Yes, Italy, the home of Giorgia Meloni, She has openly called the migrant influx an invasion, but that won't bother St Gary. He lives nowhere near the Kent coast or a migrant camp, so he can spout out all the claptrap he wants until it's in his own backyard. Which is the problem, really. The people making the rules don't live in the world you and I live in. That's why they can employ a woke advertising agency to come up with delusional adverts costing the taxpayer thousands to potentially, to politely tell the criminals what to do. It's a complete waste of our money. Before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it the government's place to be capping food prices? According to the reports, the government is planning to introduce price caps on basic food items to ease the burden customers are facing during the cost of living crisis. But should Downing Street really be getting involved? Then at 4:50, it's Worldview. The host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudderidge, will be live to discuss the top stories from across the globe, including Ron DeSantis, his highly anticipated campaign launch on Twitter that fell flat on its face after technical gremlins got in the way. Then stay tuned, because at 5 o'clock at This Week's Outside Now, my special mystery guest is an Olympic athlete who is known for competing in the heptathlon, long jump and relay. She has represented Great Britain in the Olympics in Athens and Beijing. Can anybody guess who she might be? That's coming up in an hour. As ever, tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel, broadcaster and columnist, not Lizzie Cundy. It's Christine Hamilton, she's broadcaster and author.
I don't think Lizzie would like to be confused with me.
And also journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly. Look at him, a little smiley. Right, so what do you think? I'm going to start with you, Christine. What do you make of this?
What about this advert?
Yeah, the advert. What are they thinking?
It is so mind-blowingly ridiculous, as far as I can see. It's not going to make a ha'porth of difference. It is, at least they think they're doing something, but the first thing that the government's been doing to stop immigration, apart from stopping these dependents flooding in of students, is a pathetic little thing like that. I mean, it's ridiculous. The Tory government, frankly, has lied to this country repeatedly for years and years and years. I mean, it started with David Cameron. He said he was going to get immigration down to the tens of thousands. Well, I mean, what happened to that? The idea that an advert is going to counteract immigration, I mean, it is so mind-boggling, I can hardly get my words out about it.
Well, Jennifer has called them the evil people smugglers. The evil people smugglers.
Oh, they're going to be really frightened, aren't they, by an ad?
They're so scared of this video. What do you think, Danny, an advert?
Well, I think you're right. You know, the Albanian men, young men, they're coming from a safe, prosperous country, and they're paying people thousands of pounds to get over here on a dinghy, get picked up halfway by the Brits, and then they'll end up in a hotel at our expense, and then they'll just go into the black economy. They'll probably be cleaning cars all around the United Kingdom at car washes where they launder money from drugs. This is what goes on, unfortunately, with the Albanians. You know, some are great people.
Well, there are some good Albanians, and, you know...
Of course there are.
These videos are for everybody.
But the people coming over on the dinghies aren't good Albanians. They're illegals. They're coming over as economic migrants. And St Lineker, the patron saint of economic migrants, the double standards of that guy. Why is it? I was watching Bev and Andrew last week, and Bev, this GB News, Bev was in Boston, 75% voted to leave. So if multiculturalism is so great, how come 75% of people from Boston, where there's a massive concentration of Eastern Europeans, why did they vote to leave? Is that just a hotbed for racism? Or do we need to get to the gritty reality that some people like Lineker and other people in the left-wing media, and they pontificate and they spout and they're pious, but they don't have to deal with the consequences of mass immigration?
He's nowhere near it. He's got a nice big house, he's probably got lawns, and he doesn't need to be near a migrant camp or anything.
Yeah.
Most of the government ministers don't have to be anywhere near it, although you would think that more and more MPs now are encountering real problems in their constituencies.
Well, that's when, of course, a migrant camp is going to be in their own base, like what's his name?
I mean, pre-1997, the immigration rate was about, where have we got, 50,000 a year. 50,000. Now, that just seems like a pimple nowadays. If we only had 50,000, we'd be fine. And it's just got completely run away since then. And that's... but all governments, it's not just the Tories, Labour are just as much to blame. And they don't have any answer to it either, except let them all in.
Well, the Labour Party is saying that they... well, you heard Steve Barclay saying that he's going to bring it down. I'd love to hear their plans.
But they've all said they're going to bring it down, haven't they? Every single government, every single Prime Minister, every single immigration minister have all said, oh, we're going to get it down, we're going to get it down, instead of which it just goes on and on rising.
The Albanian young men will be laughing at that.
Of course they will.
Because part of the way they get over here is they look at TikTok videos where people in London are showing off with money and guns and drugs. And yes, you're right, there's loads of great Albanians. Of course there are. I'm not sweeping such a broad brush. But these are young men who are getting on a dinghy and illegally entering the United Kingdom.
Well, they're paying for it as well.
Of course they are. And who's paying for that? So you've got to ask, what's the bigger picture? Why are they paying thousands of pounds, maybe even borrowing thousands of pounds? It's because they're going to get involved with something, I would suggest, generally speaking, illegal in the UK.
Well, do you know what? There might be some who come and do something legal, but the fact that they've got on the dinghy in the first place is the bit that gets my vote.
Yeah.
And also, there's nothing wrong with Albania. There's no war. There's no real reason why they should be coming here, apart from economic reasons, and that is clear. And that's kind of who these videos are aimed at. So people in countries, not just Albania, they're going to other countries as well to put these videos. But my thinking is that it just makes us look really stupid if we believe that these videos are going to deter evil people smugglers.
It's a sledgehammer to miss a nut, isn't it? I mean, it really is. Apparently, in Albania and possibly in other countries, there are TikTok videos, fake TikTok videos circulating, which these young people see, which offer them the streets of London paved with gold for them. They arrive here, they'll be able to set up a business, they'll be millionaires in a week. And several of them, probably hundreds by now, have been completely duped, thinking that it's going to be better than it is.
Away from broadcasting and journalism, you both know I'm a car dealer. My valeters are Albanians and they're here legally. They're brilliant lads. They're hard-working kids, but they're here legally. They've got right to stay, they've got visas, they've done it properly. You can do things properly. If you do things legitimately and you can provide a service for people in the UK, they'll let you in.
What, that old thing called a visa? Is there really such a thing?
And they flew over here. They didn't get in a dinghy.
It just seems that people are taking advantage of the United Kingdom. And I think things like this video just show how out of touch our politicians are if they believe that this is going to be some sort of deterrent, and that even if somebody saw that video from, say, Albania or somewhere else like that, would actually even believe it. So, you know, the politicians need to think a little bit harder and put themselves in the mind of the kind of people who would be doing this, and also put their head in the mind of the British public as well, because it's our money they're spending.
I mean, it may just be me, but I was unaware until relatively recently that students were allowed to bring so many dependents. I had absolutely no idea that somebody who comes over here, frankly, we should stop a lot of these students. I know the universities want them because otherwise they would collapse. Some of our universities could do with collapsing. Some of our what should we say, less academically brilliant universities. But people coming in on that sort of visa, they are at last stopping some of them. But, I mean, it's unbelievable. Hundreds of thousands of them coming in just because one of their number is doing a degree.
They should modify that. I mean, that doesn't seem very sensible, and it can easily be manipulated, so that doesn't make sense. No. That's something they could do. It's a quick win. They could have done that ages ago. I don't know why they haven't.
They're bringing in children and Granny and the cat and God knows what.
You can't bring cats in, but the others...
Oh, all right, OK. You can't bring cats.
We used to have a pest passport.
We probably could, actually.
Didn't we?
You probably can, Danny.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, the government, once again, I think they're just reminding us that they are trying to do something. But the thing is, it's laughable.
It's laughable.
No one is going to say, hang on, I just saw an advert on TikTok. I'm not getting on that dinghy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's just not going to happen, is it?
Well, because they realise if they don't do something about the immigration numbers, they are not going to win the election.
Well, they're not going to win like
it anyway. No,
Robert Jenrick, please think again, think again. Evil people smugglers, come on. Do you think that if that's what you think of them, that they're actually going to be bothered with a video? Seriously, no, you need to cut it at source and go straight to the source and stop that there. And also, a lot of people are saying just turn the boats back and people won't be interested if they know that's going to happen. But what do you think? Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.com. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. At 5, I'll be joined by my special mystery guest in Outside. Let me give you some clues. She's a world-class former heptathlete who missed out on an Olympic medal because She was beaten by drugs cheats. And it's almost time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is it their place to be capping food prices? Send me your thoughts, as ever, gbviews@gbnews.com. Tell me what you think. I've got a poll up right now on Twitter, at GBNews. You can tell me what you think. Is it their place to be capping food prices? Cast your vote now.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
It's coming up to 23 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Don't forget you can download the GB News app for free. I'm Nana Akua. Now, before the break, I was discussing the government launching an ad campaign in Albanian to deter cross-channel migrants and smugglers. As if. Right, let's see what you've been saying. Claire says the government have timed this deliberately, as already the number of Albanians coming across in boats has reduced hugely, and they're intending to take the credit for that with this ad campaign. Possibly. Andy says the government's advertising to stop Albanians coming here is laughable. It isn't. It's ridiculous. John says the only party who will stop this is Reform. The rest will just let the invasion continue. And then Anne says if they sent migrants to the Cotswolds, the problem would be solved quickly. If they sent immigrants to the Cotswolds, it's lovely there. What are you talking about? Oh, yes, that is the point. I see. OK, yeah. That's what they said it to me. That's the point. I got it. Right, it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is it the government's place to be scrapping food or capping even food prices as families feel the pinch from soaring costs of the weekly shop? Rishi Sunak's team is drawing up plans to impose price caps on basic food items. Downing Street have stressed that it would be a voluntary arrangement, which to me, I'm like, come on. What's the point? If you're making it voluntary, then nobody will do it. And if supermarkets opt in, they'll be expected to keep the cost of everyday essentials like bread and milk low. Food prices have risen by 19.1% over the past year, putting household budgets under pressure. Shops in France have a similar agreement, but the plans have already raised alarm, with some saying that the scheme is anti-market and could harm smaller retailers. So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it the government's place to be capping food prices? Well, I'm joined by Amy Nicol, author and broadcaster, Ben Habib, former Brexit Party MEP, Peter Edwards, former editor of The Labour List, and Claire Pearsall, former Home Office Special Advisor. So I'm going to start with you, Claire Pearsall. Is it the government's place to be doing this?
No, it absolutely isn't. I think this stifles competition. It is not very conservative. I'm extremely surprised that the government has put this forward. And I think that having a voluntary arrangement is just going to fail immediately. If you don't have to buy into something, then why would you? Supermarkets are relatively competitive at the moment. And why would one supermarket then put themselves at a disadvantage over all the rest?
But it could be argued that if you put your prices down, then you're at an advantage, actually. Is that not a good... What do you think?
Well, I don't think so, because if you start to run a shortage on those items, manufacturers and producers aren't going to put those products out there. They're going to concentrate on more lucrative lines. So then you create a shortage. So I think you're actually doing the whole service of food supply a complete disservice. And I think it's the wrong way forward. I don't think you need to look at that. You perhaps need to look at tariffs on those items that you import that we can't grow in this country.
It might make it quite unfair for the corner shops and people like that who won't be able to match it either. Maybe we'll put them out of business. Peter Edwards.
Well, I think it's a sign of catastrophic failure of this government to tackle inflation and a catastrophic failure of several Tory governments to ensure that we grow enough of our own cheap food. And to be frank, if the Labour Party suggested this, some parts of the media would say it's Jeremy Corbyn taking us back to Soviet Russia. I think the panel, probably for different reasons, will be united in saying it's a very poor idea and a sign of how much things have gone wrong in the last 15 years.
Amy Nicol.
Well, yeah, I think this is it's a sad indictment that it is necessary for the government to discuss things like this. But I think the reason that they've said voluntary is so that they don't actually have to do it. But it sounds good because food is so astronomically expensive at the moment. We're not talking about luxuries. We're talking about pasta, milk, bread, at a time when the supermarkets are making record profits. I think it was one of the major supermarkets made $3 billion in profits. This is blatant profiteering. So I think it's necessary. And I would actually go a step further. And if the government want to help everyone, which they should, it's their duty to protect us, then I would also subsidise fresh fruit. And I would consider giving certain items. The most shoplifted item last month was baby formula. And I would give that away for free to low-income families to help at this very difficult and unusually difficult time.
Who's going to pay for that? Ben Habib.
I'll pay for it.
That's fine, Amy. You do.
Well, I completely agree with Claire and Peter. I think they said it extremely well. This is a very unconservative policy. It doesn't work. It's interfering in free markets. The reason we've got the problems we've got, frankly, is that we've had far too much government interference in the private sector already. And the biggest example, of course, of that was lockdowns. And this is a direct result of lockdowns. It's broken supply chains, hike in energy prices as we unlock the economy, broken labour markets. And what the government needs to focus on is actually doing less government, reducing the burdens on business, reducing the taxes on business, and then getting out of the way so the free markets can sort themselves out. I would just add that even though supermarkets may have made what looks like a startlingly large figure in, that Amy just mentioned of £3 billion, actually that's a razor-thin margin when you look at the costs and the turnover required in order to get that profit. And if you start interfering in the ecosystem of how private companies charge out for their goods, you're going to have all sorts of unintended consequences, one of which could be the bankruptcy of these companies.
Claire, do you think that that's reasonable to suggest that actually we could end up bankrupting companies, and perhaps the government haven't looked far ahead? Because if you look further ahead, if you do that, you might end up disturbing the corner shops and other things that people will turn away from those businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. You start interfering in those private businesses, and this is what happens. But also, just to add to Ben's point, the supermarkets look like they're making enormous profits. But if you're going to take something as basic as a pint of milk, the amount that a dairy farmer gets for a pint of milk is so minimal, but their costs have also increased. So if you start messing around, capping prices, telling supermarkets you cannot charge more than whatever the price is you decide, they're going to go back to those dairy farmers and say, do you know what, we're not going to pay you the 45p for a pint that we currently give you, and those dairy farmers are going to go out of business. They will not survive.
It comes back to Peter's point, really, that you're saying that if you have to make policies like this, it's a disaster, Peter. Claire makes a good point, but what would you suggest would be a better way of dealing with this?
I think you need strong regulators, and it's intellectually, it's something you could probably spend an hour discussing, because I don't want a completely free market, as perhaps Ben might. So we differ on that, even though we agree that we've ended up in a mess today. But, for example, there is already government intervention in various markets. So in the energy market, there's kind of a cap. In so many others, RPI plus X, rail fares, a cap on how much you can increase a train ticket by. So there's no unfettered totally free market. It doesn't exist. But I think, that, particularly in the Ed Miliband era, the question for the Labour Party is kind of how far should the government go to intervene to ensure this trade-off between profit, which is a fair thing and reasonable, and affordability. And one of the panellists made the other point earlier about baby food being the most shoplifted item. That's horrifying, because that's not acquisitive, that's people acting out of hardship.
Well, just to come back to one of your points, though, where you said that there are other things have caps in. Usually it's markets where there's pretty difficult to have competition. So an energy market where there's no competition, that water market where I can't choose who gives me water. I have to get water from them. So it's not. I don't think that they are.
Well, energy is very competitive, but
it's not.
Rail fares aren't.
No, but you can't really
rail fares aren't.
You might be able to change your provider, but not the actual where the energy comes from initially.
But surely, if the profit margins are as small as the other panellists are suggesting, then it's not as competitive as perhaps it seems. And surely nobody is comfortable with the fact that people cannot afford to feed themselves, and that food banks are just soaring, more food banks than McDonald's in one of the richest countries in the world. I think the government intervention surely is necessary when food bills are set to eclipse energy bills as the biggest problem facing normal people.
Well, they could tax us less, don't you think, Amy? Then we'd have more money.
Well, a lot of people don't pay income tax.
Well, yeah, but if there was more money flipping around, though, don't you think, Amy?
I think there are other ways of making tax.
The problem here is we've had far too much government intervention. I completely agree with Peter that there is government intervention in everything we do. It's not, it's not a binary decision whether you have government intervention or not. It's the extent to which governments intervene. Every regulation, every law is an intervention in our private lives. But what we've had over the last 25 years, and under this Conservative government as well, is far too much of it. And we've got to pare the state back, and the government needs to understand that the only way their tax revenue is going to go up is if the private sector succeeds.
Well, if the private sector succeeds, then that would be great, wouldn't it?
But if there's no customers, because they're all going to food banks.
No, they're not all going to go to food banks.
Eat food or don't. People have to use supermarkets.
No, well, listen, we'll carry on discussing that. Thank you so much to my guest, editor of The Labour List, Peter Edwards, Claire Pearsall, former Home Office Special Advisor, Amy Nickel, broadcaster and author, and Ben Habib, former Brexit Party MEP. Thank you very much for your thoughts. But what are yours on this? Do you think that this is the place for the government to be getting involved with capping prices for supermarkets? And frankly, if it's voluntary, who's going to do it? Let's see what you've been saying. Right, Chris says, I pity the farmers. If the government are mandating a low price for food and bread, milk and bread, they'll severely be shortchanged, and farming is already tough enough. That's true. They're saying it's voluntary, though. But, I mean, Virginia says that this shows our government doesn't know how to govern without copying other countries. We should get rid of Hunt and get the country moving. He hasn't got a clue and is making us very poor. Pat says, I've lived through difficult times, but you've knuckled down and got on with it. we have lost the resilience and become moaners who rely on the state. And I suspect part of that is a bit of COVID, isn't it? People got a bit used to staying at home. I mean, that's my thoughts, but what are yours? You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, we will continue with the Great British Debate. And I'm asking, is it their place to be capping food prices? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton, and also broadcaster and journalist Annie Kelly. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thank you very much, Nana. I'm Rory Smith in the GB Newsroom. ITV has denied that This Morning is under review following reports the show could be axed. Sources have told GB News that bosses have just 7 days to save the programme following the Philip Schofield affair. Staff members who raised concerns about the TV presenter's actions say executives need to prove they're properly addressing the issue. The broadcaster has confirmed the show will air tomorrow. A 5-year-old girl has died following a house fire in Pembrokeshire. Despite the efforts of emergency services, Alicia Salisbury passed away at the scene of the blaze in the Ponty Glacier area last night. Her family, who described her as a beautiful daughter and sister, are being supported by specialist officers. The force says it's working to establish the cause. The government is launching an ad campaign to stop people from crossing the channel. The advert, set to be circulated in Albania next week, will warn people they face being detained and removed if they make the journey. Critics have already branded it as pointless, saying it won't deter them. A record number of people made the crossing in small boats last year, and more than 6,000 have been intercepted so far this year. Well, meanwhile, Labour says it would impose time limits on hiring overseas workers in a bid to curb migration. The Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has told the Sunday Telegraph it would serve as an incentive to train British workers. She also suggested the party would ask the Migration Advisory Committee for appropriate timescales for importing labour. That's it for now. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website. That is gbnews.com.
Thank you, Rory. Still to come, it's this week's Outside. Now, my special mystery guest is an Olympic heptathlete who was given a bronze medal retrospectively after a Russian athlete failed due to a doping scandal. So who could this be? On the way then, it's the Great British Debate. That's next. I'm asking, is it their place to be capping food prices? You won't want to miss that.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. This is coming up to 41 minutes after 4 o'clock. We are the People's Channel. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome on board if you've just joined us. Now, we're returning to our Great British debate this hour, and I'm asking, is it the government's place to be capping food prices? Now, as families feel the pinch from the soaring cost of a weekly shop, you may have noticed it yourself, Rishi Sunak's team is drawing up plans to impose price caps on basic food items. Now, if the supermarkets opt in, so because it's a voluntary arrangement, then they'll be expected to keep the costs of everyday essentials like bread and milk low. And the food prices have risen by 19.1% over the year. So that's 1 year, it's a fifth higher. So anything you're buying, you can add a fifth of the price of what it would have been last year, which is a lot, which has put a lot of household budgets under pressure. So for the Great British debate this hour, I'm asking, is it actually the government's place to be capping food prices? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Danny Kelly, you know all about food.
I eat food. I think I eat more than a lot of people, but I eat food.
Well, of course, if there's a bit more of you, you want to fill everything up, right? You'll get full up, you can eat more.
To answer your question directly, is it the government's responsibility or is it anything to do with the government? The answer is no. But I'm going to caveat, because I think now is the time. If you're, like Amy said, earning billions of pounds, OK, I think now is the time for a bit of goodwill from people who are doing really, really well out of things. It doesn't mean that the supermarkets are going to sell a pint of milk at a loss. All they've got to do is sell it at cost. OK, so that way it doesn't affect the farmers who they buy it off. That way, just hear me out, just hear my logic. So it doesn't mean that you're going to make a loss on it. People are going to buy other stuff. People are going to buy a bottle of wine, but people are going to buy pizza. People are going to buy different things where you will make a margin. And also, what we mustn't forget, that this is temporary. We're not turning into Cuba. This is a temporary measure.
Are you sure we're not turning into Cuba?
Of course we're not. This is a temporary measure, because it's voluntary, OK? It's not mandatory by the government, it's voluntary by the supermarkets.
Things start like that, don't they? And then when people don't take it up, then the rules start to change. And what about the impact to, say, farmers? Like you say, oh, they'll keep it at cost price, but then they might start, pushing the farmers and squeezing them. And, of course, supermarkets have economies of scale, which the farmers don't, and that local small farmers and people who supply supermarkets may not be able to do that. I think the government might put them out of business.
My answer was dependent on them not screwing the farmers.
But
so if they start to screw them...
sure of that.
Well, the farmers are outspoken people. They're not soft. They're great at letting us know about how screwed they are with supermarkets.
Yeah, but will the government do anything to help them, Christine?
Well, I think this is complete madness. I mean, in another context, Margaret Thatcher said many decades ago, you can't buck the market. And she was talking about the financial markets. To me, you cannot buck the supermarket market. It is about the most cutthroat business there is. We've got what is it, 6 major supermarkets. Aldi and Lidl came bursting onto the scene and they forced everybody's prices down. And they're always advertising their prices against each other. I mean, you go to, for the sake of argument, Sainsbury's, and it'll say, you know, this is 5% cheaper than Tesco or whatever. So they're always vying for it. And things like staples like milk and bread, some of them are probably loss leaders anyway. And I don't think Rishi Sunak, he probably doesn't go to the...
He doesn't go to the supermarket.
No,
He doesn't know.
We're very lucky where we are because very, very close together we've got an Aldi, or is it a Lidl? I can't remember. But anyway, one of those. And next door, we've got Waitrose. So we start our shop in the Aldi or the Lidl, whichever one it is. And if they've got what we want, we get it there because it's cheaper. Then you go to Waitrose to get the things that you want that they haven't got. And people are very, very savvy when it comes to supermarket shopping. And I just think it's crazy. And as somebody on your panel said, it will just force the prices down. And you say the farmers are resilient, but they're not. The farmers
I didn't say resilient. What I said was that they can be outspoken. I didn't say resilient. So what I mean is if the government if Sainsbury's and the supermarkets start to chip away at the margins from the farmers and basically are passing that loss down to the farmers, then the farmers will let us know about it.
But why should that be the case? Why should the pressure be placed from the government onto the supermarkets to deal with the situation when it's actually the government who've created the situation?
That's
exactly. It's the government because they're ridiculous.
Worldwide inflation. It's not just in the UK.
No, but the government's ridiculous reaction to COVID, that mammoth lockdown and quantitative easing and goodness knows what. I mean, if we had the head of Aldi and the head of Lidl as Prime Minister and Governor of the Bank of England, we would probably be rather better off.
They're brothers, aren't they?
I mean,
They'd be well off.
They're the ones who created
What do you say that? They're brothers, but they fell out. Do you know the story about these two? They hate each other. They don't like each other.
They don't like each other.
So they fell out as brothers. One set up Lidl first, and they had a massive falling out. And the other brother said, "Right, I'm going to set up Aldi. I'm going to screw you over now." And that's the politics
apparently, wherever a Lidl sets up, an Aldi will soon appear, and vice versa.
Well, that's good. That's
but
good
I mean,
for
the government's responsible for this inflation. They really are. This is just window dressing, and OK, it's voluntary, but my guess is it's not going to be taken.
It's temporary. I think we're getting too hung up on maybe 15p on a pint of milk. But OK, I agree.
The government's business.
Christine, you and I agree on that. But I think that it's the government leaning on them to say, look, we're in this mess. Can you please do something and maybe just sell a pint of milk for 15 pence less at cost price? That's all. We're not asking you to lose money on the
it's
pint.
despicable. I think the government should look at their taxation policy and perhaps release some of the money into the market for us. So the taxing, we're clearly taxed too high and it's not really helping with inflation. Instead, they should actually give us more money in our pockets so we can go and buy things at a normal price and stop forcing supermarkets to push down their margins. Although I think that there is sort of in my head, I keep thinking about windfall taxes on companies who profited heavily over COVID, and I don't know why they still haven't dealt with that. So like Amazons and people like that, I would like to see them taking some tax from them.
Apparently, and also it would be nice. I mean, Amy mentioned this thing, which I was horrified, actually, that the biggest thing that is shoplifted is baby milk, which is a horrifying statistic. Would be nice if a few more billionaires had a little bit of philanthropy.
Well, Amy said she was going to fund it for the whole UK.
Yes,
I think she did. So she's got deep pockets. May I just say,
she's a billionaire, then
the best loaf of bread you can get is 75 pence from Marks and Spencer's. The best tin of beans is 47 pence from Aldi. Brilliant stuff. Marks and Sparks, lovely loaf for 75p.
Really?
Can't get a lot cheaper than that.
I hardly ever eat bread, so I really
That's
don't
why you're
know.
so thin.
Well, I have a bread maker, so I make my own bread.
When you say you have a bread maker, you employ someone as a bread maker, or you have an electrical...
She has staff.
I have staff. No, I have a bread maker that I bought, and I stick the thing in there, and then I come back a few hours later, and it's a loaf of bread. It's quite handy, actually.
How much does a loaf of bread cost you then, with the ingredients?
Well, about maybe 30p.
Yeah, but you've got the initial cost of about 250 quid for the
it was
bread
200,
making.
it was like 90 quid.
90 nicker.
And I've had it for about 5 years. So used it 3 times.
Yeah.
White elephant.
Exactly. This show is nothing without you. What, the bread maker? This show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our Great British Voices, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing today. I've got 2 of you. I've got John Reid in Kidderminster and also Gareth Wynne-Jones in Snowdonia. Gareth, I'm going to come to you. The government's plan, they're saying that they're going to try and get supermarkets to have products that are cheap. I mean, how does that affect you as a farmer?
Well, again, it's ridiculous. What are they even interfering? the cost of production for every farm has gone through the roof. You know, we've seen food shortages. There's less land now. We're losing land to rewelding. We're losing land to solar farms. We're losing land to building, you know, and we still are expected to feed the nation affordably. It's crazy. And I'll tell you something now. It won't be the supermarket that will be paying that price when it's lowered. It will be the farmer. And cheap food comes at a cost. Cheap food comes at a cost to the environment, it comes at a cost to the animals, and it comes at a cost to the farmer. Mental health in this industry is at a low. And when these multimillionaires in London start to pushing buttons and telling farmers what to do and how to do it, it's absolutely ridiculous. We want to feed the nation affordably, sustainably, and regeneratively, but we need that backing. And when we hear the person that's in charge of this country saying these things, it's absolutely getting every farmer totally frustrated, furious, and they want to start to change things. So we need to be looking at government, we need to be looking at policies, and we need to be looking at a fair price for what we're producing, or you won't have them farmers on the ground producing that food.
Thank you very much for that, very passionately put, Gareth Wyn-Jones. What about you, John Reid? Do you agree with Gareth?
Do I agree with him 101%? My goodness me, sir, what a case you've made for it, and how wonderful to say what you said. To answer your question, Nana, is the government going to be good for capping? Of course they shouldn't be capping prices. How can it be that they can produce lambs in New Zealand and get them at a table price in the UK cheaper than our English farmers can do? It's not right. We should be subsidising the farmers, taking all the caps away and letting the market forces work their business, because our British farmers, in my world, are the best in the world, and I would support them 101%. Well said, sir.
Thank you very much to both of you. Thank you so much, Gareth Wyn-Jones, a farmer, and also John Reid there, Inc Minister. Lovely to talk to you both. Well, I don't suppose the government consulted any of the farmers or the people who'll be actually producing this food at this cheap price, and they were expecting the supermarkets to then sell out to us at a low price. It sort of feels like they haven't thought it through, but I've been asking you whether it is their place to be capping food prices. Lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Let's see what Jonathan says. He says, as a dairy farmer, I'm concerned that the retailers will just pass the effect of price controls down the supply chain to me as the primary producer in order to maintain their profit margins. Well said again. Bernard says, with an election looming, Sunak wants our votes. I used Aldi and Lidl, excuse me, and I shop around. But if prices go too high, I no longer buy that product. I don't need the government to get involved. Alexandra says that food costs far too much and my family is really struggling. I'm in favour of anything the government want to do to help us, as I've scrimped as much as I can at this point. Graham says supermarkets made a mint during the pandemic, which is one of my points, and they always only look after their shareholders. It's time they help the public for a change. Love that. Well, there's a poll up on Twitter throughout the show asking, is it the government's place to be capping food prices? And currently 38% of you say yes. The remainder, 62%, say no. Well, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, it's this week's Outside. Now, my special mystery guest is an Olympic heptathlete, a relay runner and a long jumper. But she also got a bronze medal retrospectively after a Russian athlete failed to have it after a doping ban was overturned. Failed to have a doping ban overturned. She first entered the sporting world stage at the age of 27. Any guesses who she might be? But before that, we'll go into Worldview. The host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudridge, will be live to discuss the top stories from the States, including Ron DeSantis, his presidential campaign and his fail on Twitter. All of that on the way.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. it's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Good afternoon, welcome on board. This is GB News, we are the People's Channel. And don't forget as well, you can stream the show live on YouTube and catch up with all the programmes. I'm Nana Akua, and it's now time for World View. And on the menu, US President Joe Biden and House Speaker Republican Kevin McCarthy have reached an agreement to raise the US debt ceiling. President Biden stated that the deal is an important step forward. And then travelling over to America now, let's have a chat with the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Duddridge, to give us an update. So, Paul Duddridge, Joe Biden speaks the debt ceiling. Really? What is that all about?
Well, it's just how much of the credit card can we continue to max out, because we're all very, very keen to keep protecting Ukraine's borders as opposed to our own. And they've, in true political fashion, these hotheads have come to a decision to kick the can down the road for 2 years. So they're going to accept maxing out the credit card even more, and we'll look again in 2 years' time, and who knows who'll be president.
Well, who knows? It probably could be Trump, but probably not Ron DeSantis after his launch. Talk to us about that disaster on Twitter.
Yeah, well, we talked last week. I said, we said he was going to launch on Wednesday, and he did. And he launched on Twitter, and he had Elon Musk interviewing him. And the whole thing was a complete catastrophe. I think people are making too much of it. It's going to be forgotten very, very quickly. It was just hilarious for a second. One of the lovely little nuggets out of this was it's the very first time I've seen Biden successfully troll anybody. This is how bad the Twitter launch was. So Twitter was going really bad. In the midst of it all, Biden's team just put this little tweet out saying, this link works, and it just went to Biden's campaign donations. So when you can be trolled...
What was it that went wrong, though? Some people don't know what happened. What was it that went wrong with his thing on Twitter?
Well, I'm no big tech guru, but my understanding was it was a mashup of the amount of followers that Elon Musk already has. So some sort of, let's say, server thing that Elon Musk has, because he has such a large number of followers, mixed with the server required to handle that many listeners. I think it was like 500,000 listeners at one point. Those two things didn't mesh very well. People did get in and listen, but they were having to come in through accounts which had fewer followers.
So
apparently it was... It basically... I wish I just said crashed.
You should have said crashed. That's what we're waiting for. The word is crashed. Well,
but that's why, apparently.
So what happened to Trump then? What's he up to? Because I feel like he's been quite quiet. Has he?
He has been quite quiet. Well, this week he met with Boris Johnson on Thursday. We only found out this on Friday. We don't know where they met or officially what they discussed. But the word is that Boris Johnson met with Trump in the hope of converting him to being more of an enthusiast for the Ukraine, for the war in Ukraine and supporting Ukraine, because he's viewed as very much. I think he's actually just viewed as a peacemaker. But there are people that will try and present him as some kind of Putin supporter. But apparently that's the official line from Johnson's camp, is that he was trying to maybe make a case for supporting Ukraine more fully in the coming campaign. And so that was and this week, of course, we now have a date for Trump's criminal trial in March 25th. Next year. No suggestion of election interference at all from the establishment. It's crucial that the Stormy Daniels trial goes ahead in March 25th, slap bang in the middle of a presidential campaign. But please, anybody that says that's election interference by the establishment, please, they need to have their mouth washed out with soap.
Honestly, as if they think we can't see that. Paul Dudgery, thank you very much. Good to talk to you. He's the host of the Politics People podcast, as ever. Great as ever. We'll be hopefully catching up with him next week. Thank you, Paul. Well, loads more still to come. I've got my mystery guest on outside coming up. But if you just joined me, welcome on board. This is GB News, online, on TV and on digital radio. More to come in the next hour. It's 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. For the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. After the news, I'll be joined by my very special celebrity guest, who is best known for being an Olympic athlete and representing Great Britain in the Athens and Beijing Games. So stay tuned. Who do you think she is? Keep your guesses coming. And then for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, can This Morning survive Schofield's scandal? But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thank you very much, Nana. I'm Rory Smith in the GB Newsroom. ITV has denied that This Morning is under review following reports the show could be axed. Sources have told GB News that bosses have just 7 days to save the programme following the Philip Schofield affair. Staff members who raised concerns about the TV presenter's actions say executives need to prove they're properly addressing the issue. The broadcaster has confirmed the show will air tomorrow, but viewer opinions vary over the fallout.
It's not really for us to judge someone. I mean, what he did, if it's true that this young chap was 18, it's nothing to do with us. I think he should speak to his family.
I will say that I think perhaps the show needs fresh people on. I think that the show really relied on the chemistry that Holly and Phil had.
For me, I'm less keen to watching the programs with them. As they split, I'm all right, and I think that Holly's gonna get the career even bigger now, you know.
I like Phil and Holly, so I'm very sad to see them go, because I love them both. So it's a pity, really. And I was shocked to hear about Phil, because I didn't think he'd do anything like that, be so deceitful.
Well, it comes as new details emerge about Philip Schofield's relationship with the young ITV employee who was reportedly 15 years old when they first met. The Mail on Sunday says the TV presenter arranged an interview for him, which resulted in a job as a runner when he turned 18. The affair started later. Well, editor of the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, says they were right to question the relationship.
It's so unprecedented. And he wrote to Katie Hind and said, I don't expect any mercy, which is
extraordinary. And it's because actually Katie had been very brave and done a story a couple of weeks ago that sort of went quite far to hint at this friendship. And he sent a complaint to Ipso and said, you know, the Mail has, you know, got this wrong. And of course we hadn't. And so he was right to apologise, but it's not very often in showbiz that people do a full mea culpa like that and say, don't show me any mercy.
In other news this afternoon, a 5-year-old girl has died following a house fire in Pembrokeshire. Despite the efforts of emergency services, Alicia Salisbury passed away at the scene of the blaze in the Pontedlastia area last night. Her family, who described her as a beautiful daughter and sister, are being supported by specialist officers. The force says it's working to establish the cause. The government is launching an ad campaign to stop people from crossing the channel. The advert, set to be circulated in Albania next week, will warn people they face being detained and removed if they make the journey. Critics have already branded it as pointless, saying it won't deter them. Well, a record number of people made the crossings in small boats last year, and more than 6,000 have been intercepted so far this year. But meanwhile, Labour says it would impose time limits on hiring overseas workers in a bid to curb migration. The Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has told the Sunday Telegraph it would serve as an incentive to train British workers. She also suggested the party would ask the Migration Advisory Committee for appropriate timescales for importing labour. Former Defence Secretary Lord John Hutton says it's a balancing act and the economy also needs to be considered.
There's no easy solution to this problem, though. It's a global phenomenon. People are moving around. And I think we've got to certainly deal with the boats, the illegal entry. But I think we've got to take a very long, hard look at the other aspects of immigration policy. David Davis referred to families of students coming in and so on. I mean, I think there are things that can be done, but it's got to be done in a way that doesn't damage the economy and supports the growth agenda. I think these are important issues for us now, because I think securing economic growth is probably the biggest economic challenge that we face.
Supermarkets could be asked to introduce a price cap on basic food to help struggling households. The government is reportedly drawing up plans suggesting the move, but a Treasury source told the Sunday Telegraph it would be voluntary. The scheme would see retailers charging the lowest possible amount for products like bread and milk. Well, food prices, which are expected to keep rising, have increased by 19.1% in the year to March. 2 Just Stop Oil protesters have been charged after disrupting the Gallagher Premiership rugby final at Twickenham. 37-year-old Dr Patrick Hart from Bristol and 40-year-old Sam Johnson from Essex ran onto the pitch and threw orange powder onto the field. Well, play was suspended as the men were escorted from the stadium. They've been charged with aggravated trespass. And finally, Mars bars are going green, with the company upgrading its packaging to be more environmentally friendly. The wrapper is being switched from plastic to paper as part of a pilot scheme to explore different options. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, back to Nana.
Hello, good afternoon. It's just coming up to 7 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Now, still to come, each Sunday just after 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP or somebody who's had an extremely interesting career, to take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. And today my special mystery guest is an Olympic heptathlete, a relay runner, a long jumper, who was given a bronze medal retrospectively after a Russian athlete was found to have doped. She first entered the sporting world stage at the age of 27. She was also awarded an MBE for her services to track and field. Any guesses who she might be? And then for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, can This Morning survive the Schofield scandal? ITV sources have told GB News bosses have just 7 days to say that this morning, following the fallout surrounding Philip Schofield. But with his name being so synonymous with the brand, can anyone turn it around? What do you think? Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. So it is time for this week's Outsider. My mystery guest is a world-class former heptathlete. Now, she holds a trio of Olympic medals, but it took 10 years to receive 2 of the 3. Now, she was won bronze outright in Athens in 2004, but bagging the next 2 medals was more complicated, as she finished 5th in the heptathlon and the 4x400-metre relay. But then it emerged later that her competitors had not been playing by the rules and that she'd been beaten by drugs cheats. And since missing out on the podium moments and being retrospectively awarded 2 bronze medals, she's been team leader of England's athletics team for the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. Any guesses? Well, I'm pleased to say that I'm joined now by Kelly Sutherton, MBE. Kelly, thank you so much for joining me, crikey. Wow. So, Kelly, talk to me. Sorry. You're a fantastic athlete, but a lot of people might not know much about your backstory. So talk to me about, what brought you to athletics and, so many, when you're doing so many events, how can you end up being good at any of them? It's like master of all, jack of all trades and master of none, but obviously not for you.
Good afternoon, Nana. Basically, I was one of those kids at school that most people probably hate. I was good at everything, picked first for the teams, and I just had a natural ability and affinity just to do sport, as well as being quite academic. Played netball, hockey, etc., all the way through school and athletics. And it wasn't really until I went to university that I continued netball and athletics and started to really show my prowess in athletics. So netball got dropped, and I just concentrated on athletics then. And when I left university, I didn't go straight into the sport. So I wasn't like a traditional athlete who went to junior championships, etc. I wasn't really that good then. I was okay. It was just that I had an opportunity, and I was working for a bank at the time, and I moved to Birmingham, and somebody saw something in me, and that somebody was the coach of Denise Lewis, who was then the Olympic champion in heptathlon, and that was Charles Van Comenay, and he said, "You've got something and I'd like to coach you." So with permission of my former coach, Trevor at the time, Trevor Marseille sadly passed away, I linked up with Denise and Charles. And then 9 months later, after that linking up, I won an Olympic medal in Athens. So it was kind of a rags to riches story. Not that I was in rags, but it was kind of quick, but very late in my career, so to speak.
So how old were you? Because a lot of people, when they get into their sort of 20s, will be thinking, "Oh, well, I've just got literally no hope."
I was 26 when I linked up with Denise and Charles. I mean, I'd gone to the Commonwealth Games in 2002 in Manchester, but I still hadn't fulfilled any promise. I think I was okay. I was filling spaces on the team, but I wanted to do more, and I knew I had something, but I just didn't know how to unlock it. And it was just had an opportunity, and I just ran with it. And I had to give up my job. Charles was quite forceful, like, give up your job, be a full-time athlete, and let's really take the bull by the horns and give it everything. And I did, and it changed the path of my life. In that short period of time, I went from being 59th in the world to being number 3 very, very quickly. So it was just because I was able to dedicate that time to being a full-time athlete. So, not everyone gets that opportunity, but I did, and it worked for me.
So a heptathlete, how many events are those?
7. So you have 4 on one day, 3 the next. So it starts with 100-metre hurdles, then you do high jump, then shot put, then 200 metres. And then the next day we get up, body aching a little, and then you do long jump, javelin and 800 metres. So it's quite a tiring 2 days. It's spread from, like, the first day starts usually at 9 in the morning and can finish at 10 at night. Then you have to come back in the morning just long jump at 9 or 10 in the morning, but the 800 could be 10 o'clock at night. So at a championship, so it's very 2 long days, and that's what makes it so tiring.
You're making me feel tired just listening to you. What's the one that you hate? I think it's the hurdles. You do hurdles, don't you? Do you have to do hurdles?
Yeah, you hurdles first.
Hurdles.
And funny enough, you probably could be right because it's the first event of the day and you need to get that right. So that's the one you're probably most nervous for. And once that event is done and you've done okay, then you can, fit the other 6 in. I mean, a lot of people would have said that probably javelin wasn't my favourite event because I wasn't so good at it. But it caused a lot of stress. But I enjoyed all 7. There was always something about each one that I really enjoyed. And even the 800 metres, obviously your heart's in your mouth all the way around because that one that hurts. But also it's at the end. And if you're good at it, and I was good at the 800, it wasn't so bad as it was for most other heptathletes who didn't enjoy that event.
That was my favourite race, actually, the 800. But the hurdles, I have just PTSD after bashing my knee on one of them. It's like, I hate the thought of them. They're the worst. I mean, they're just so painful. I don't know. It's just, you just got to jump over them just to make sure you don't get hurt on them. So talk to me about... Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was going to say, in training, and plenty of times I've hit my knee, and you just learn not to.
Yeah, you do after that. And you had to wait a couple of years to get a medal. Was it 10 years or something you had to wait to get your medal? Well, talk to me about that.
Yeah, so from Beijing, correct. So from Beijing, I was 5th and 5th, and then we was upgraded to 4th in the heptathlon because someone got caught out there. And in our 4x4, we finished 5th. And then subsequently, like 8 years later, we heard that one of the Belarusians in the 4x4 had been disqualified. And there was allegations over one of the Russian athletes who then had her samples tested back from Beijing. And she'd actually subsequently cheated Jessica Ennis out of a world title, 2 world titles, I think, at the time. She went to the Court of Arbitration of Sport, which took about a year. And then once that result came through and in my favour, or in favour of her losing her medal and me getting it, I got my medal, one of them at the Olympic Stadium, which was great. That was the 4x4 with my teammates. And then the heptathlon medal was at the Team GB Ball. That was celebrating Pyeongchang 2018 Winter Olympics, and nobody knew that was happening apart from a couple of people. So I got to have a really intimate medal ceremony dressed up.
So you got a ceremony here? Yeah, because that would be the annoying bit. I'd be annoyed that I didn't get the ceremony. But what do you make of this? Because you're talking about cheating, and in my head, I'm thinking that when I see trans women in women's sport, I get quite angry at that. I have nothing against somebody who's trans. It's up to you. It's not my business, but I get really, really angry when I see trans women competing against women because they're not women in terms of biology, which is sport is all about bodies. Surely, what's your view on all of that?
First off, I think a lot of people are very frightened, especially females in sport, to talk out about this without being offensive or offending anybody. And rightly so, it is a tricky subject. I am all for fairness in sport, regardless of what gender you are. I am for natural-born females having their own category, and it's female sport. Now, the greater conversation is to be inclusive and diverse. How does sport or society cater for a different category that isn't the norm, I should say? And so that's the conversation. How do we accommodate transgender men and women in that category? I don't know the solution, but that's the conversation. When you see little girls who want to emulate their sports stars in whatever sport, tennis, motor racing, athletics, swimming, whatnot, if they're not starting on a level playing field, if they're going to be against, a boy who's gone through puberty, because the advantages there are so great and the sciences have come up and shown that there is an advantage. I just think the conversation needs to be around how do we deal in society and elite sport, because this is recreational and elite. It's from top to bottom. How do we deal with it in society to make it fair and inclusive? And I don't have the answers to that, unfortunately. But I agree with you, Nana. It's a tough subject that a lot of people don't like to talk about, and in this case they offend or upset.
Well, I'm all right with it. I don't see why they just can't have their own category.
Yes.
I don't see what the problem is. Have your own category because it's not fair on the women. You know, like you probably won't find a trans man competing against men because that wouldn't make any sense. Because I mean, you never know, but it's unlikely that they would beat a man only because they are natural-born women. So I don't see why people are having such a difficulty just having like a separate category for trans athletes and one for women and men, or an open category that you can, if you want to go in, you can. But I don't see why.
I think what the problem is that it's probably terminology, and forgive me, I forget this wrong. So female, women, we're male, female categories, and transgender women. So it's like, are they transgender females or transgender women? And is obviously, if you're going to use correct grammar, that's what it should be. I do think, though, what potentially this could open up for if there wasn't a separate category and transgender women were allowed to compete in the female category, natural born females, I think you would probably end up seeing in a generation or so's time the potential for maybe gender doping. I don't know. That, you know, there's always so many connotations here that there's unscrupulous people in the world that might think this could be an advantage or a money maker. But it's just a discussion that needs to be had to have fairness, inclusion for all. And I just don't feel there's been that sensible discussion. It seems so simple and to say what you're saying, Nana, just go, this category is for transgender women.
But it is.
But I don't think it's actually all that simple.
Why?
It sounds simple, but I don't think it's that simple. However, I agree with you. I just think the wider discussion is how does that fit into society with recreational and elite sport? Because, you know, society has to reflect what's happening in elite sport, what it should do. So it's making sure that's correct.
I genuinely don't see what the issue is. I think if you're a transgender woman, you can have a transgender woman category, you can have a woman category, and then you can have a man, and you can have a trans man category. If, you know, to make it fair for all, rather than making it unfair for one, but inclusive in one way. By being inclusive doesn't mean that everyone's in the same space. It can mean that everyone has a space. That's all it is. It's not taking things out and being offensive to people. It just seems that people are tiptoeing around a very logical conclusion, which they will come to in the end, but we're going to have all this furore about it until eventually somebody goes, let's have a separate category. I promise you. Mark my words.
I think a lot of people have done that on social media and in the media and various articles over the last couple of years. But for some reason, nobody seemed to have grasped that concept, and it's just been quite kind of probably controversial in terms of obviously a sport or society or community banning the rights of a transgender woman to compete in a female category, which obviously, for fairness for women, that's what should happen. But then not have the solution of a category for them transgender women to compete in. So it's like, sorry, you can't compete in anything.
Well, they should do it
just
anyway.
the men's group. So if the solution was another category, let someone do another category to see how well that's received and accepted and what it looks like. At the moment, we don't know what that really looks like.
I've heard the argument that there won't be enough transgender people in it. That's why. And it's like, well, they'd win anyway, usually against a woman, so they can just win their own race. It'd be fine. Listen, Kelly, what are you up to briefly? We're running out of time. So what's your next thing then? Hello, the cat.
Sorry, it's my cat making their debut. What am I doing? So I work for Sport England actually now. I work in talent coaching. So I help develop coaches and people of the future who work in a talent space, about 55 sports. So it's gone from team leader of being the most successful team in the Commonwealth Games in track and field, which was a brilliant role, absolutely, great with me and Boris. Had such a great, it was a brilliant summer. I was really proud to be, because I live in Birmingham, so I was really proud to have that opportunity to lead my team at Commonwealth Games. They were absolutely amazing, and it was one of the most inclusive teams with the power athletes and able-bodied to be able to compete together, and it was a pleasure to lead them all. But now we've moved on out of athletics and now producing, hoping to support as many more sports as possible to be greater at coaching. And that's my aim at the moment with my team.
Well, you keep doing your thing. I know you've got an MB as well. Well done, Kelly. Fabulous. Lovely to talk to you. As Kelly Sutherton, she's an Olympic heptathlete. MBE, Kelly Sutherton. Thank you very much. Lovely to talk to you. Well, if you just joined me, welcome. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now for the Great British Debate, I'm asking, can This Morning survive the Schofield scandal? While ITV sources have told GB News that bosses have just 7 days to save This Morning. That's following the fallout surrounding Philip Schofield. But with his name being so synonymous with the brand, can they actually turn this around? We'll discuss after this.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and it's time now for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is it possible, do you think, that This Morning can survive the Schofield scandal? ITV sources have told GB News that bosses have just 7 days to save the show. Philip Schofield was also being synonymous with the brand, but do you think they can turn it around? What are your thoughts? Get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or why not tweet me at GB News. What do you think? Do you think that they can actually save it? So joining me to discuss that, because what happened, obviously, if you read the Mail on Sunday today, you'd have noticed that the information about Schofield, where he met the young runner, when he was the young runner was just reportedly 15. According to the reports, the individual in question started a job this morning when he turned 18. So he wasn't underage when Philip Schofield allegedly sort of started the whatever encounter that they had. So this comes as his former co-host, Holly Willoughby, said that his admission was very hurtful and claimed that Schofield had lied when previously asked about the relationship following all these revelations. So what do you think? Can they save This Morning? Will it be back on air? They said it would be tomorrow. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, can This Morning survive the Schofield scandal? Joining me to discuss, Belinda de Lucy, former Brexit Party MEP and political commentator, Nigel Pawley, showbiz reporter and Express newspapers, Matthew Stavenham, political commentator, and Ellie Phillips, showbiz reporter. Well, Ellie, I'm going to start with you because I've been listening to all your reports on the Schofield scandal, scourge of Schofield. So what do you think? I mean, really, do you think that This Morning can survive this scandal?
So I would say an hour ago, I would have said yes, potentially maybe with a rebrand of, if Holly leaves, 2 new presenters fronting it, maybe a change of name, but essentially the same format, the same time slot, the same magazine staff. However, in the last hour, Dr. Ranj Singh, who was the kind of advice doctor on This Morning for 10 years, he's just tweeted a huge 4-part statement about his experience on This Morning. And he basically says that the issues with This Morning go way beyond Philip Schofield, saying it takes more than one person to create a toxic culture. He mentions bullying. He says he complained about the behaviour of This Morning top bods to the heads at ITV. But then when he did this, he began being used less and less, and thinks that's basically because he was a whistleblower. And he said the problem is with, how people were being treated. He said he didn't know what happened with Philip Schofield, but I think what's happened now is that the likes of Dr. Ranj Singh, Dan Wootton, they're all opening up about their experiences at This Morning, and it's not coming out well because of it. So I think this has been a bit of a Pandora's box moment that I don't know they're going to be able to contain. If they had, potentially, but now this is all coming out, I'm not sure if more like this comes out, how they're going to be able to control it any further.
Nigel Pawley.
Yeah, I agree. I think this has gone way beyond Philip Schofield, and I think the BBC's struggled with the Savile and various other things that they've hidden up. This started out just the why have a presenters fallen out, and that's a fairly bland story. But Philip Schofield's career has gone in 16 days, and it's symptomatic that the people named by Ranj Singh were also named and were the 4 key ITV executives. I won't name them for legal reasons, but heads are going to have to roll over this. People knew what was going on. Dan Wootton raised issues in 2020. The investigation was said to be just rumours. But what Ranj Singh is a NHS doctor, well respected, and as Ellie just said, it's damning. What he's said is he's made allegations of a toxic culture, bullying, and discrimination. And in the modern day workplace, he has named individuals who he has accused of bullying. He has said that he acted as a whistleblower and was not only ignored but was not used anymore. And I think I don't see how they can save it. Unless they can put 2 new presenters in. They can put. I still think Holly Willoughby is damaged by this. I think she's damaged goods anyway. And they can put Alison Hammond in. They can rebrand it. But questions are going to keep on coming. Schofield's gone. However, more stuff has come out, and this is going to go on and on. Once the show becomes the story, then in newspaper terms, great. The GB News, great.
We love it.
But viewers are turning off. It's a car crash, and yet it's losing viewers.
Well,
which is bizarre, because normally when bad things, people tune in to see how bad it is.
Yeah,
people have been turning off.
But not this time.
I think it's toast.
Belinda de Lucy, is ITV, is This Morning toast? Which is breakfast.
I do. I think it's too toxic now, and I think the mud is really sticking. And as your guests have said, I actually think this is the tip of the iceberg. And it's a shame. The format really worked. Back in 2022, the Christmas show with Holly and Phil brought in 1.2 million viewers, and it has been going down in recent weeks by 100, 200,000, and I think it's going to get worse, because even with Philip's departure, there are so many questions about ITV senior staff, how they handled the matter, and it just, because they're kind of in purgatory at the moment, those whirling questions just bring a nasty feel to it. It feels seedy, and I think they need to completely redo it, call it something else, maybe do the same sort of format, but make it different. Maybe, have two completely new presenters on, but call it something different. I think the brand's gone toxic now, sadly.
Matthew Stadlen.
Well, I haven't seen Ranj Singh's statement, and I have no idea about the facts of what has or hasn't gone on behind the scenes. We all know, you know, Nana, that a TV show is much more than the presenter. So when I've been presenting shows on the radio or the TV, it's so much about the production team. They work incredibly hard to make everything go well on air, whether that is TV, radio, or what have you. As far as what's happening on screen, I can assure you of one thing. Every single show is bigger than the presenter. It's just like with football clubs or rugby clubs. Every single sporting club is bigger than their biggest star name. You think about Newsnight, for example. Yeah, I think it suffered when Jeremy Paxman left because he was extraordinary, perhaps a once-in-a-generation broadcast. But the show went on. You think about BBC Sport coverage.
So do you think that we're running out of time, Matthew? So do you think they're going to? Do you think it will go on then? What do you think?
So long as nothing untoward has gone on behind the scenes, that means that ITV bosses strike the whole show out. And I suspect that if there has been anything that's gone on, that will be sorted out. As far as the on-screen talent is concerned, I don't think the departure of Philip Schofield will affect it one little bit. Yeah, you might get a dip in viewers, but not enough for them to scrap the show. I think how hard is it to present a daytime TV show? I don't watch daytime TV. I'm sometimes on it. But come on, I think most of us today here in the studio or on Zoom or wherever we are, we could obviously have a stab at it, and there'll be lots of people who want to have a go. I think the show will go on.
You think the show will go on? And on that bombshell, Belinda Lucy, thank you very much, former Brexit Party MEP. Nigel Pawley, showbiz reporter at Express Newspapers. Matthew Stadlen, political commentator. And also the fabulous Ellie Phillips, showbiz reporter. Thank you so much for joining me. Right, well, let's have a quick look at what you've been saying regarding Philip Schofield. Ollie Clive says, I'm afraid this is a story that will run and run. The reason being that Schofield, with his sugary sweet, holier-than-thou attitude, has crossed the line in terms of ethical standards. You don't expect people on such a high-profile daytime TV programme to be embroiled in such sleaze. Stanley says this story says more about the TV showbiz politics than it says about anything else. It's a murky world with pushy people who think that they rule the world. What's wrong with that? No, it's pretty bad. No, it's not quite like that. Not here. You wouldn't get away with that here. Keith says, how many people have affairs? Why is this front-page news with all the problems we've got going on? That is a good point, but anyway, you're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GBNews. We'll be discussing it in just a moment. I'm asking, can this morning survive Schofield's scandal? You hear the thoughts of my panel, Christian Hamilton and Danny Kelly. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thank you, Nana. I'm Rory Smith. Well, as you've been hearing, ITV has denied that this morning is under review, following reports the show could be axed. Sources have told GB News that bosses have just 7 days to save the programme following the Philip Schofield affair. Staff members who raised concerns about the TV presenter's actions say executives need to prove they're properly addressing the issue. The broadcaster has confirmed the show will air tomorrow. A 5-year-old girl has died following a house fire in Pembrokeshire. Despite the efforts of emergency services, Alicia Salisbury passed away at the scene of the blaze in the Ponteglacier area last night. Her family, who described her as a beautiful daughter and sister, are being supported by specialist officers. The force says it's working to establish the cause. The government is launching an ad campaign to stop people from crossing the channel. The advert, set to be circulated in Albania next week, will warn people they face being detained and removed if they make the journey. Critics have already branded it as pointless, saying it won't deter them. Well, a record number of people made the crossing in small boats last year, and more than 6,000 have been intercepted so far this year. Well, meanwhile, Labour says it would impose time limits on hiring overseas workers in a bid to curb migration. The Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has told the Sunday Telegraph it would serve as an incentive to train British workers. She also suggested the party would ask the Migration Advisory Committee for appropriate timescales for importing labour. That's the latest, and you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website. That is gbnews.com.
Still to come, travel chaos at the airports as electronic passport gates stopped working, leaving passengers feeling frustrated. And then for the Great British Debate, which is coming up next, can this morning survive the Schofield scandal?
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
News is the People's Channel.
It's the
Good afternoon, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. It's time now for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, can this morning survive the Schofield scandal? ITV sources have told GB News that bosses have just 7 days to save this morning following the fallout surrounding Philip Schofield. But the broadcaster has said that the programme will be back tomorrow at the usual time and confirmed that it has no plans to axe the show. Now, this all comes as it was revealed in the Mail on Sunday that Schofield met the young runner when he was just 15. Excuse me. And this comes as his former co-host, Holly Willoughby, said that his admission was very hurtful and claimed that Schofield had lied when previously asked about their relationship. Following all these revelations, can This Morning continue to stay on air? Or is the brand name tainted forever? Say for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, can This Morning survive the Schofield scandal? Well, let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and as a broadcaster and journalist, Danny Kelly. We'll start with you, Danny. Do you think
Liars.
Perhaps on fires.
Do you know what? First of all, I feel desperately sorry for Mrs. Schofield, the mother. The mother of a pedo and the mother of...
Hang on, what would you mean, the mother of Philip Schofield?
Yeah.
The mother?
Yeah, the mother of Philip Schofield, the mother of a convicted paedophile, and now the mother of, well, this fella, Philip Schofield. I desperately feel sorry for her. I would like Timothy Schofield, the irony, to release a statement saying, as far as I am concerned, I no longer have a brother. Do you remember that's what Philip did to Timothy?
Yes, he did.
Is the future? Is there a future for this show?
But you might feel that way about a brother or relative of yours who's been accused of put into prison.
Yeah, right,
I mean, I'm just saying, Jenny, you might feel that way. And
yes, but to come out,
advertise it.
But hang on, having raised that paedophile thing, to come out publicly and say that's the brother, yes, not Philip. To come out and say I no longer have a brother, that was to save his career.
Correct.
And I thought it was an appalling thing to say. You know, blood should be thicker than water.
But even if you felt that way, perhaps you wouldn't advertise and say...
I think Christie's right. I think
it was
damage
save
limitation.
His career.
I think he was trying to
It was horrible.
fires.
I'm just like, yeah... But
it didn't work long.
Publicly.
No, you're right. Anyway, it just shows you how nasty the fella is. A little vindictive, selfish little dwarf. OK, getting back to this...
No, he's not a dwarf.
He's not a dwarf. That's not fair.
This morning...
First of all, I don't think you can use the word dwarf anymore. That's probably not allowed. And also, yeah, I'll take vindictive and selfish, but the dwarf...
All right,
OK.
All right. Okay.
He is quite tall.
Is he quite tall? He comes across as very short.
No, he's taller than me.
Is he? OK. So is there a future?
And I'm quite tall.
Is there a future for This Morning? I think there is a future for This Morning. Whether it's with Holly Willoughby or not, I don't know. Because she's now... I think potentially she's damaged goods. I really do. You know, that Q gate's coming back to haunt her.
Oh, yes.
These photographs... She apparently said she knew nothing about this lad. And there are photographs on the internet 3 years ago of having a photograph with Philip Schofield and the lad.
But that doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't mean they were having an affair.
No.
You can be photographed.
I mean, we've been photographed together,
Does that
Danny.
mean you two are together?
Well, yeah.
No, but the rumours associated with that photograph have been on the internet for 3 years. Are we honestly saying that Holly Willoughby never read them?
Well, maybe, but these are rumours, and as they said at ITV, that these were rumours, and the two of them denied it. So really, if that was the case, you'd have to take it on face value. But then there are other people coming forward saying that it was common knowledge. So it feels like there's a culture within ITV.
I believe people like Eamon Holmes, who's worked there for years, and he's now saying that Winston Churchill, a great saying from Churchill was, in defeat, defiance, in victory, magnanimity. And there is no magnanimity being shown to Philip Schofield. It just shows how hated and loathed he is. And people now are reading and seeing Eamon Holmes say, look, the ITV bosses, they need to have a look in the mirror. They're maybe enablers.
Well, you know, but then that's not really fair to accuse them of enabling something because we don't know the full story. So, but at the end of the day, the fact is that the situation and the environment there seems a little bit toxic. If so many people were rumouring about this, and apparently they did, though, continually ask whether there was an affair. But then, would you get somebody confessing an affair? Probably not, would you?
Not only has he lied to everybody, lied to his wife, and you're so right. It's the first time anybody's mentioned that, to my knowledge, is his poor mother, if she's still alive.
Poor woman. Well, she was in Cornwall with him last week.
With his mother the other day.
Was he? Oh, I mean, honestly, what she's had to put up with. But also, to ask a younger person who you've had an affair with, perfectly legal, he was over 18, but to ask them to lie through their teeth to ITV is quite a big ask.
You don't know that whether he asked them to lie or whether they both decided to lie. They might have both decided to lie.
Philip's the powerful one, isn't he? But you mentioned Q-Gate. I mean, that was when that was so appalling, the way they handled Q-Gate. Instead of saying, yes, we did, and it was wrong, I wish we hadn't done it. Instead of which he said, oh, we did it on behalf of all the viewers who couldn't. I mean, you know, if David Beckham can queue and Theresa May can queue...
Danny Kelly. I didn't realise he was so tall. I've learned something today.
Well, you have, so there you go. He's not a...
Anyway, To answer the absolute question very, very briefly, because I can tell you're against the clock, I don't think This Morning can continue, and I certainly don't think Holly can continue on This Morning. They've got to have a completely clean break.
The clean show, get rid of all of them, start again. Right, this show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome some of our great British voices. This is their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they really think about the topics we're discussing. Today I'm joined by two of you. The others are in the sunshine, cheeky things. Right, let's start with Miranda Richardson from Northamptonshire. Not the Miranda Richardson, but Miranda Richardson in Northamptonshire. Miranda, what do you think?
Afternoon, Nana. I think one of the fundamental things is, whatever happens, he has continually lied to all those people close around him. You know, to portray such hardship with Holly when he came out as gay. You know, she sat there with her friend, with her best friend, support, this outpouring of love, and he quite clearly continued to deny any other kind of relationship. That must feel so hurtful. I mean, to his wife, to his mother, all of that, but to continue to deny that purely, and I think Christine used the word, you know, he's powerful. That's the problem. You kind of... Some of them really believe that they're beyond everything, that they're beyond touching, they're beyond catching out. You can't do that. That's not on.
So yes or no, should it continue, Miranda, This Morning? Yes or no?
The programme, the format, the people like the format of the programme, it's great. Not with the team as existing.
Not with Phil and Holly, not with Holly even Holly. David Barham. David Barham, what do you think?
Hello, Nana. Actually, I must say I've never watched This Morning, so I have no idea. But I do remember over the years there's been scandal after scandal on This Morning. We had Fred the Weatherman, and they carried on. But I think the whole format probably now needs a change because they have to say draw a line under it. Holly, I think, could come back under a new programme because she seems untouchable at the moment, a very powerful figure within entertainment, and I think she would come out of it. But I think they have to say enough. We're rebranding in September. It's no longer This Morning. It could be yesterday or tomorrow.
Yesterday's news. I love it. Yesterday. Thank you very much, David Barham, and also Miranda Richardson. Thank you very much for joining me. Lovely to talk to you both. Well, what do you think? Let's move on to another story that caught my eye. Travellers have had their journeys disrupted yesterday when the electronic passport gate stopped working at UK airports. Our passengers described the situation as utter chaos and a complete joke. Also, over the bank holiday, British Airways flights were cancelled due to a technical glitch in their systems, and lengthy queues formed at the port of Dover. Does anything work in this country? Although the one in Dover was actually the fault of the French. Let's go to you, Danny. What do you think?
Does anything in this country work properly? It's not when there's a heat wave. We know that for sure. No. I was listening to the radio. People stuck in the queue for hours. It was bringing out the best in the British spirit, except for when apparently there was people fighting. People were sharing bottles of water. Does anything work in this country? Yes, we're a fabulous country, but things like just goes to show how if something, you know, AI is the next big thing. Yeah, just goes to show if something small stops, then the effect it can have on people.
Christine?
Well, my niece was caught in the British Airways thing. She was at Heathrow Airport trying to get to JFK. She lives in New York. Her luggage had gone through, and suddenly British Airways, she gets a thing on her phone. Sorry, your flight's cancelled. So, what do you do?
Really?
She managed to get what she reckons was she had to rush to another terminal. She got about the last seat on a Virgin Airways economy, and she was travelling for work, so she had been going British Airways business. So she ended up in Virgin economy in the middle seat. So it was quite a thing. And she still hasn't got her luggage. But Danny's right. We rely, in the good old days, you know, you walked up and you showed a person your passport, and a person checked you, and this, that, and the other. Now the whole thing is so automated, and one little.
And if a little microchip fails,
but it was Lord Curzon who said that nobody but a fool leaves the bounds of their estate on a bank holiday, but most people aren't fortunate enough to have an estate, so of course they want to go off. Although with this weather, why bother?
Why bother? Yes, well, it's time now for Supplement Sunday. My panel are going to discuss the stories that caught their eye. I'm joined by author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. I'm going to start with you, Danny Kelly.
Do you know what? This is a great story.
World's
because
miserable countries.
No, what it is, we must just live in a miserable world because because the headline is not the happiest countries, it's the world's 20 least miserable countries. So it's not that they're happy, it's just that they're least miserable. And it's based on lots of things like wealth, employment, education.
What's
things
the top
like
one?
OK, Switzerland is
the
the least miserable. I mean, maybe they're dead miserable, but they're the least miserable. Ireland is number 3.
OK.
Yeah.
Where are we?
OK, 28. And we're 5 behind the United States at 23. So we are the 28th least.
28th.
The Yanks are the 23rd. We're the least 28th least miserable.
Where are the French in that?
The French, I hear you ask. They're not in there. We knew
They're
they were
more
in there.
miserable.
You just don't know how miserable.
Christine, what's your one about?
Well, I've got my story is that Rishi Sunak has announced the first ever free speech czar, who is a Cambridge professor, who his task will be to wage the war on woke. At last,
oh my goodness.
Whether anything will happen, he is going to be the director for freedom of speech and academic freedom. And he is going to, every time a university tries to cancel anybody or censor anybody, he is going to have the power to go in and investigate. I mean, at last, as long as he's got lots of power and he's allowed to use it, we are fighting back.
But do you think that's what universities were for free
well,
speech? That's missed the point, haven't they?
Yeah.
Well, let's go over to my supplement then. Now, this one is, of course, the Just Stop Oil. Now, they stormed the pitch during the Premiership rugby final, throwing the, that ridiculous orange paint stuff that they've been doing on the pitch. I mean, is there anything that they can't ruin? I mean, it's just it's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, I heard them earlier, yesterday they were talking to us about sustainability and getting rid of all new oil and gas, and it's just like...
I think we would be probably well closer to Switzerland if it wasn't for those idiots at Just Stop Oil in the least miserable list of countries around the world. Because people like that and their actions, I don't hate them individually, they're nice people probably, but I don't like what they're doing. And it makes people so miserable. The commute to London.
It's so unfair on the rest of the population. I mean, they've done the Grand National, they've done the rugby, did they do something?
No, Just Stop Oil wasn't the Grand National, that was some sort of
that
animal
was the
liberation
animals.
front.
That's right, no, don't get... But they all tend to muddle up. They all tend to muddle up. They're throwing stuff all over buildings and stuff. And it is...
Start throwing themselves off buildings.
Well,
don't tell them.
No.
Well, no, they won't do that because they're all just entitled.
But no, the answer is there is nothing they can't ruin because then you never know what's going to come next. I mean, the coronation people were terrified they were going to chuck paint all over the king.
No, but that didn't work out. They didn't, thank goodness. But listen, if you just joined us, welcome. But it is the end of the show. But let's talk about what's been on the show. I've been asking you, is it the government's place to be capping food prices? What do you think? Well, according to our Twitter poll, 39% of you said yes. And 61% of you say no. I've got to say a huge thank you to my panel, author and broadcaster, Christine Hamilton. Christine, thank you very much.
Pleasure, always.
And also thank you so much to broadcaster and journalist Danny Kent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Danny. Good to see you.
Smile.
Great to see you too.
You look rather serious.
Thank you to you at home for your company. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure as ever. I'll be back next week at Saturday at 3. I'll leave you with the fabulous weather. Enjoy the Bank Holiday Monday.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. I hope you've been enjoying the long weekend so far. There has been a lot of fine weather around thanks to high pressure that's been with us and is staying with us throughout the rest of Sunday and into Monday as well. Whilst it's staying largely dry, we do just have this slight squeeze in the ice bars across the southern half of the UK, so the breeze is going to be strengthening throughout this evening and overnight. So just be aware if you're out camping out here. Elsewhere, the cloud will be melting away throughout the night and we'll see a good number of clear intervals developing. That will allow temperatures to just drop off ever so slightly overnight. Most towns and cities will be down in single figures, but there is the risk of a patchy rural frost for parts of northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland as well. Despite that slightly cool, chilly start, though, there will be a good number of sunny intervals as we kick off the bank holiday Monday, and we'll retain that sunshine as we head throughout the day as well. Some wispy cloud, perhaps just making the sunshine hazier in places, but that thin cloud is not going to protect your skin from the high UV levels that will be around throughout the day. So do make sure you're thinking about some skin protection. Feeling a bit cooler along eastern coastal areas with that breeze, but generally 20 degrees and feeling warm as you head further west. Into the overnight period, again, we'll see largely clear skies, so temperatures will be dropping off once again, the risk of that patchy frost. It's going to be the northern areas of Scotland where we'll stay cloudiest as we head into Tuesday, perhaps the odd spot of drizzle for parts of Shetland, but elsewhere it'll be staying dry once again and a good amount of sunshine if you are still heading outside. Just a bit of cloud floating its way in along eastern coastal areas. High pressure is staying with us as we head throughout the rest of the week, but as winds move in a clockwise direction around this, we're still going to be feeding in that easterly, northeasterly breeze with cloud potentially just pushing into eastern areas throughout the week. So generally, west is going to be best for those temperatures. Bye-bye.